Welcome to the AM Glimpse Scammer Hall of Fame Part 2, where facts are optional, confidence is the only real currency, and the only skill on display is the ability to avoid prison time. From the complete oddballs like Malachi Love Robinson, the teenager who pretended to be a doctor, to Samantha Azzopardi, the adult who pretended to be a lost teenager, to the more sinister scammers like Melissa Caddick and Nate Holzapfel, who stole hundreds of thousands of dollars from people who trusted them, to the terrifying predator Joao DeFaria, who swindled Oprah and was later exposed for committing some of the worst crimes imaginable. This marathon is going to be a wild ride of some of the most creative and calculating con artists around. Malachi Love Robinson was born in May 1997 in Florida. He suffered from the autoimmune disease lupus as a child, and according to his grandfather, had a few close brushes with death. His illness inspired him to pursue a career in healthcare, and by the age of 18, he had opened up his very own clinic. But this is not a story of some child prodigy who overcame adversity to blitz through medical school in his teens. This kid not only fooled all the adults around him, but also the state of Florida. Malachi Love Robinson began his career in healthcare in January 2015 at the St. Mary's Medical Center in West Palm Beach, Florida. He had somehow gotten his hands on a white lab coat embroidered with the St. Mary's logo and the word anesthesiology. Every day, he'd pop his lab coat on, place a stethoscope around his neck, put a face mask on, then stroll into the hospital and wander around for the day. To be clear, Malachi did not work there. He was only 17. He kept a low profile and kept the mask on to hide his face. He didn't interact with the staff or patients. He pretty much just roamed around the building, and apparently nobody thought he looked out of place. After an entire month of his incognito internship, Malachi finally mustered up the courage to enter a patient's room. He introduced himself as Dr. Robinson to the patient, a pregnant woman, as well as the OBGYN, Dr. Sebastian Kent, who was in the middle of conducting an exam. Dr. Kent was stunned. He had never seen this young doctor before. He queried Malachi about his qualifications, and it quickly became clear that this was a child and definitely not a doctor. Dr. Kent notified security, who then called the police. Malachi was arrested, but the hospital and police decided not to charge him. Surveillance footage was reviewed, and it was determined that Malachi never made contact with any other patients. Malachi insisted to the police that he was a real doctor and was doing legitimate work shadowing other doctors at the hospital for educational purposes. When Malachi's mum arrived at the scene, she explained to the police that her son had an undisclosed illness and had not been taking his medication. Dr. Kent later told police that he found a note on his desk from Malachi, requesting to shadow him. Security guards at the hospital stated that they had seen the teenager around, but didn't realize he didn't belong there. Malachi wasn't going to give up on his dream of becoming a doctor just because he got arrested. In September 2015, Malachi got a job as a massage therapist in the New Directions Rehabilitation Center in Boynton Beach, Florida. We don't know what his resume looked like at the time, so who knows what kind of medical training he did or didn't do. But he did add a bunch of impressive looking post-nominal letters to his name, like ND, which stands for Naturopathic Doctor, PhD for Doctor of Philosophy, HHP for Holistic Health Practitioner, and AMP, which he might have made up because the internet didn't seem to know what it stood for. Malachi had also obtained an NPI number, a National Provider Identifier number, which is issued by a government agency to healthcare providers in the United States. Malachi worked at the rehab center for nearly a month, until the Florida Department of Health slapped him with a cease and desist order for practicing without a license. In late 2015, Malachi went shopping for a new mobile phone and met salesman Perseus Wells. They started chatting and became friends. Perseus quickly learned that his new buddy, although young, was brilliant. Malachi said he was sick as a child, so he was homeschooled, then completed several online courses to earn all of his medical qualifications. Malachi showed Perseus his diplomas from the Southwest College of Naturopathic Medicine and Arizona State University, as well as certificates from the American Association of Drugless Practitioners and American Alternative Medical Association. Malachi shared with Perseus his dream of opening his own holistic medical clinic. He just needed some starting funds. Perseus agreed to invest $10,000 of his savings into Malachi's venture. the New Birth, New Life Medical Center and Urgent Care. Together, they secured a lease for a space in the West Palm Medical Plaza, which was located just 10 minutes away from Malachi's old haunt, St. Mary's Medical Center. Malachi registered his business with the state of Florida and through his NPI number was approved to accept Medicaid and insurance payments. Perseus bought furniture and equipment and 2 non-doctor staff members were hired to assist with operations. Malachi created a website and listed the range of services he provided, from annual physicals and family planning to air, water, light, heat, earth, phototherapy, food and herb therapy, psychotherapy, electrotherapy, physiotherapy, mechanotherapy, naturopathic corrections and manipulation, and natural methods or modalities. Malachi threw a grand opening party with his friends and family, and by December, New Birth, New Life was open for business. Malachi had listed himself on all the online health directories, and soon enough, he was actually seeing patients. One of his patients was 86-year-old Anita Morrison. She was suffering from severe stomach pains and found Malachi after hastily Googling the closest doctor. She visited the clinic and Malachi diagnosed her with arthritis, then gave her the natural sleeping aids valerian and melatonin. He told her she would need to have an ultrasound and an endoscopy at a later date and charged her $3,500 for the procedures. Anita wrote him a check, then went home and took the vitamins. Her stomach pain didn't go away, so she rang Malachi back and agreed for him to come make a house call. He made a total of 5 visits to Anita's West Palm Beach home over the next couple of weeks. During the final house call, Malachi ended up calling an ambulance for the elderly woman and offered to hold onto her purse and keys. While Anita was being rushed to the hospital, Malachi accessed her bank cards and stole almost $35,000 to pay for his car loan and credit card bills. He also took her checkbook and cashed a total of $2,800. Around this time, some of Malachi's extended family members who had heard about his new clinic felt that something was off and tipped off the police and the local news. For one thing, he was telling people he was 25 when he was actually only 18. Plus, his family knew he had not received the required education or training to run a medical clinic. In January 2016, investigative reporter Terry Parker showed up at the New Birth, New Life Medical Center unannounced and found Malachi alone in the clinic, wearing a white lab coat with a stethoscope around his neck. As he processed what was happening, he quickly removed his doctor's coat and stethoscope. Terry grilled him about his medical credentials. He was only 18. How could he be a doctor? Malachi clarified that he was not an MD, a medical doctor, but he had his PhD in holistic and alternative medicine, and therefore could use the title of doctor. He stated that he was just the business owner, and that he was working with some medical doctors, but wouldn't specify who. He also wouldn't specify where he had gone to college or which boards certified him. Malachi may not have any real qualifications, but his ability to dodge questions was admirable. The truth wasn't too hard to figure out though. Firstly, the certificates that were hanging on the walls of the clinic were essentially mail order credentials. Neither the American Association of Drugless Practitioners nor the American Alternative Medical Association are recognized by traditional educational institutes or government agencies, and they'll send you a fancy looking certificate for a few $100s. He also had diplomas from Southwest College of Naturopathic Medicine and Arizona State University on the walls. A quick email to each of these colleges verified that Malachi had not attended either school at any point. Malachi also insisted that his PhD was legit. He had been ordained as a minister at the Universal Life Church, an online Christian school, and had earned an honorary doctorate, so he felt he was able to call himself a doctor and sometimes even a reverend. In reality, he had purchased a doctorate of divinity from the online institution for $29.95. Following the impromptu visit from journalist Terry Parker, Malachi decided to invite her and the cameras back to New Birth, New Life Medical Center for a formal interview and tour of the office. This time round, he was much more composed and prepared. He reiterated that he wasn't an MD and stated that he had never treated any patients. When asked about his medical training, Malachi said he had shadowed many naturopaths and doctors in the past, presumably referring to his month-long stint at St. Mary's. Then there was the question of how he even managed to get so far as to open up a registered business in an actual medical building alongside real medical practices.
Well, the main question was, how did I do it? How did I open up a practice? That's the main question, and it's simple. The same way a 35 or a 40-year-old would open a practice. You get the idea, you get the funding, you open up the practice. You find a location that is ideal, you start the practice. That's, just because of my age, it doesn't mean I had to go through hoops. It was actually pretty easy, and it was a smooth experience with opening the practice and getting registered and all these different things. So, that was smooth. Some people have been telling me that opening this practice was a bad idea because, of my age, and I tell them, well, if that's the case, then why did Jesus come? He was 12 when he started preaching. Another question that people like to ask is, are you portraying yourself as an MD? And I tell them all the time, I say, no, that is not what I'm doing.
Malachi probably wasn't lying when he said it was actually quite easy to open up his clinic. According to the American Medical Association, the state of Florida does not regulate all licensed naturopaths, which means there are no exams, certifications, or training required for someone to open up a naturopathy practice. Even in states that do regulate naturopathy, postgraduate training is neither common nor required. According to the AMA, less than 10% of naturopaths participate in an approved residency, and such residencies last only a year and lack a high degree of standardization. Meanwhile, real physicians have to complete at least 4 years of medical school plus 3 to 7 years of residency. Malachi recognized that the lack of naturopathy regulation was a loophole that could be exploited, so he took it and ran with it. Shortly after Malachi's interview with Terry Parker, the Florida Department of Health and Palm Beach Narcotics Task Force launched an investigation. A female undercover agent posing as a patient arrived at the New Birth, New Life clinic and requested an appointment for her cold symptoms. She was given a patient questionnaire to fill out, then Malachi led her into an exam room. He took her temperature, weighed her on a sliding scale, measured her blood pressure, and listened to her lungs with a stethoscope on her back. He then told her she wasn't sick and instructed her to take over-the-counter allergy medicine. As he typed up notes on his laptop, the undercover agent signaled officers waiting outside to enter for the takedown as Malachi had just illegally given her medical advice. A few moments later, Malachi was arrested and charged with practicing medicine without a license. A month later, he was charged with 1 count of larceny and 5 counts of using another person's identification without consent for the Anita Morrison situation. The Florida Department of Health also issued him another cease and desist. Malachi was released from jail on a $21,000 bail. After the news story broke, Malachi wanted to clear his name and declare his innocence. He organized his own press conference to thank his supporters and expressed that his attorneys were working hard, even though there were no attorneys present and it's doubtful they would have allowed their client to make a public statement alone.
First of all, I would just like to simply say that on behalf of myself and my family, we thank you for the concerns in the community about the accusations that have happened. I just want to say that I am deeply saddened and a little disrespected by some of the things that have come forth. But I will say that my attorneys are working hard. They're working around the clock to make sure that this issue gets resolved in the best way possible.
Malachi also sat down for an interview with ABC News and was as evasive as ever.
I do currently hold a PhD in what I don't feel comfortable disclosing because that is not the issue here. The issue that I face now is accusations. I have shadowed many doctors.
You're saying your training comprises shadowing other doctors, real doctors.
Your training comprises of a lot of things.
Yeah, but you weren't in med school.
So I am not portraying as an MD. I've never said that I've gone to school to be a MD.
It seemed Malachi began to realize that his logic wasn't holding up, and he eventually cut off the interview.
I don't appreciate your tone. I don't appreciate the way you're portraying this interview to actually be. I'm sorry, I'm gonna have to cut this interview short.
Around the same time, Malachi did another interview with Inside Edition. This time, he had a lawyer by his side, but he didn't change his tune. He stood firm that he had done nothing illegal.
There is no law that states that you have to have a bachelor's or master's or a PhD to take someone's temperature.
Anyone should be able to open a clinic?
This is a free country. Anyone with the funds to open a clinic, let me finish, can open a clinic.
My PhD is actually in a very broad field. Once again, as of this moment, I don't feel comfortable disclosing that information.
If Malachi wasn't so hard set on being a doctor, he could have gone on to have a career in theatre or politics. Malachi's friend and business partner Perseus Wells also agreed to talk to the media, and, well, Malachi did really have a knack for picking unassuming adults to deceive.
Perseus, did you believe this young man was a physician?
At the time, yes. Like I said, he pretty much is accused of not being one. I still don't know which is which. Is it true? Is it isn't true? I don't know anything about MD and all that. He told me he was a natural doctor, so I didn't know anything about natural doctors and what they do. So I just took him at the word and seen all the certifications and his degree from some state, Arizona State, and transcripts, and so. Wow. What can I say?
Were you surprised?
I don't know much about it.
Were you surprised when he was arrested?
Was I? Oh, yeah. I was very surprised.
In September 2016, police were called to the Karga Motors car dealership in Stafford, Virginia. 19-year-old Malachi was suspected of trying to fraudulently buy a $35,000 Jaguar. He had been acting suspicious, bragging to the dealership employees about how he had just bought 2 iPads. He then put down a woman's name and her social security number on the credit application, claiming she was his mum. Employees Googled Malachi and saw that he had been arrested in Florida several times and immediately rang the police. The woman who Malachi said was his mum turned out to be a distant relative. She confirmed to authorities that she did not give authorization to co-sign for the car purchase. Afterward, a review of her credit history showed that 2 additional loan requests had been made using her details in the last few days, along with a $1,200 transaction for 2 iPads and a cell phone. Malachi pleaded guilty to making false statements to obtain credit, identity theft and forgery, and was sentenced to 1 year in prison. He was transferred back into Palm Beach County Jail after completing the sentence. Although Malachi had long maintained that he had done nothing wrong, in January 2018, he pleaded guilty to grand theft, practicing medicine without a license, and fraud charges. He was sentenced to 3.5 years in prison, but received some credit for time served. He was also ordered to pay over $80,000 in restitution to his victims. But even behind bars, Malachi didn't lose his penchant for publicity. He sat down for yet another interview with Inside Edition, and he finally, kind of, owned up to being a fake doctor.
I was a young kid that got overly ambitious and just said, to hell with the rules and regulations.
Do you have regrets about what you've done, or do you regret that you've been caught?
I 100% regret what I've done. And the reason being is that because, number one, I've messed my life up, a great deal.
Do you still want to be a doctor?
I do.
He was released in September 2019 and got a job with a shipping broker, United States of Freight in Florida. He had given up on his dream of becoming a doctor, but old habits die hard, and Malachi got in trouble once again. Instead of sending customers invoices for payments, he would instruct them to pay directly to one of his personal bank accounts or to his Venmo or PayPal. Malachi stole over $10,000 before his boss, Dan O'Sullivan, figured out what was going on. After he was confronted, Malachi admitted to what he had done, then later texted his boss, "I swear I wasn't thinking and I will make it right. I get these compulsive stages and do things without thinking." In 2023, Malachi, aged 25, pleaded guilty to grand theft and organized scheme to defraud, and was sentenced to 2 years and 4 months in prison. Every now and again, when we're coming up with subjects for videos, we come across an individual who is truly a walking red flag in every way. This is one of those stories where it just keeps getting worse, and you're hoping that by the end, some sort of justice gets carried out. Nate Holzapfel grew up in Utah, where his father Richard was a prominent writer and educator in the Mormon church. Richard wanted his 5 kids to follow in his footsteps, but Nate had discovered early on that he had the gift of the gab and decided to pursue a career in sales. He did well for himself selling cars and insurance in Utah, but he got tired of squandering his sales talent on other people's businesses. In 2012, Nate, his brother Zach, and their childhood friend Jeff Jensen invested $90,000 into starting their own company, Mission Belt. They produced leather belts that didn't have holes, and $1 from every sale would go to a charitable cause. In 2013, 34-year-old Nate, a natural salesman of the team, appeared on a season 4 episode of Shark Tank, a reality show where aspiring entrepreneurs pitch their business ideas to a panel of investors. Nate burst onto millions of TV screens with his attention-grabbing pitch. He confidently explained how they reinvented the belt and designed a ratchet buckle that ensured the belts would always give the wearer the perfect fit. Nate wasn't shy about asserting his sales skills and described himself as a one-man sales force. He claimed that everyone he showed the belt to wanted to buy it. What he needed from the Sharks was access to their networks, so Nate could sell the belts to more distributors and retailers. The Sharks were impressed with Mission Belt's sales numbers, and with Nate, who was clearly committed and a true go-getter. Mark Cuban exclaimed,
"I love you, I love you."
Kevin O'Leary loved the product.
"I will buy one from you. I like the product a lot, I'm going to use it."
In the end, Nate successfully struck a deal with Damon John, the founder of clothing brand FUBU, for a $50,000 investment for 37.5% of the company, plus the condition that Nate had to remain on as head of sales. In 2016, Nate appeared on Beyond the Tank to give an update on the status of Mission Belt. Business was booming. In the 3.5 weeks after the initial Shark Tank episode aired, Mission Belt did over $1 million in sales. They had hired 45 employees and were now in 1,000 stores, but mostly small boutiques. Nate wanted Damon's help getting the belts into 20,000 big box stores. During the segment, we see Damon visiting the Utah warehouse and office for the first time. He also visited Nate's home and met his family. Nate had upgraded his 1997 station wagon for a brand new Mercedes and had moved out of his small apartment into a 10,000 square foot mansion in a gated community. The house had an indoor basketball court, cinema, and billiards room. We are also introduced to Nate's wife, Irene, and his 2 young kids. Damon expressed some concern about Nate's drastic lifestyle upgrade and cautioned him about living beyond his means and losing focus on the business. In the end, Damon advised against getting Mission Belts into big box stores. He reminded Nate that his strength was his sales skills and suggested he set a more conservative goal of 5,000 stores and personally visit the stores to conduct sales training for shop staff. Damon was so impressed with Nate's sales chops that he took him under his wing and had him working on some of his other Shark Tank investments, helping entrepreneurs with their sales skills, building their e-commerce platforms, and generally preparing their businesses for when their segment would air. One of the businesses Nate worked with was Bubba's Q. Retired NFL player Al Bubba Baker and his daughter Brittany pitched their family's line of deboned baby back ribs and barbecue sauces on Shark Tank in September 2013 and successfully struck a deal with Damon John, $300,000 for a 30% stake in the company. Damon's team immediately got the ball rolling and brought in Nate to build a brand new online store for Bubba's Q in time for when the Shark Tank episode would air. Bubba and his family were excited to sell their ribs and sauces online for the first time and were anticipating a huge wave of sales. Nate was supposedly some e-commerce genius, but he didn't have the website up and running until just 3 hours before the episode aired. But Bubba quickly forgave Nate when they brought in $250,000 in online orders over the next few days. Unfortunately, the excitement was short-lived. Nate had forgotten to install a sales tax function on the online shop, and the Baker family had to refund 14% of their total initial orders. Despite these hiccups, the Bakers continued to trust Damon John and his protege Nate, who eventually took control of the Bubba's Q business bank account. Nate kept the Bakers in the dark about their own financials. The Bakers were uncomfortable with this arrangement, but were under the impression that Nate was some millionaire business mogul, so they believed that this was the best thing for Bubba's Q to grow. However, after more issues with the promotions on the website, the Bakers decided to part ways with Nate. Brittany Baker was able to access the business account temporarily and saw that there was $100,000 in it. In June 2014, 7 months after the Bubba's Q Shark Tank episode aired, Nate closed the bank account and sent the Bakers a check for only $8,000. The Bakers told the LA Times newspaper that they raised the alarm with Damon John, but the matter was not followed up. Meanwhile, Nate's own business, Mission Belt, was flourishing, and his profile was on the rise. He began to use his success story and Shark Tank appearances to get himself various speaking gigs and podcast spots, where he'd ramble about his backstory and sales techniques. Nate began to consider himself to be something of a shark, and decided to go all in at pursuing a career in TV and launching his own consulting business, the Nate State of Mind, and left Mission Belt shortly after his Beyond the Tank episode aired. To prepare for his new venture, Nate called in a favor from a friend of a friend, the late TV and radio host Larry King. Larry agreed to film a mock interview with Nate under the condition that it could only be submitted privately to TV producers as an audition tape. However, Nate ended up including clips from the mock interview in 3 public YouTube videos, which have all since been deleted, but had racked up a combined 65,000 views. He also included quotes, some real, some made up, from Larry King on his promotional material. "You're selling me on laughing," read one quote from his press kit. "Nate Holzapfel is one of the best interviews I have ever had," claimed his website. Nate also included Larry King's logo on his website to further imply he had actually appeared on the talk show before. In late 2018, Larry King Enterprises sued Nate for trademark infringement and right of publicity violation and was awarded $250,000. 46-year-old Courtney Morton had had a rough few years. She was diagnosed with breast cancer in 2014 and went through chemo, a double mastectomy, radiation, and 2 reconstructive surgeries. She got divorced in 2015, and when her father died in 2019, she became estranged from the rest of her family. On top of that, she was the primary caregiver of her disabled adult son. When the pandemic hit in early 2020, she felt more isolated than ever. Courtney was scrolling through Instagram one day when she received a follow request from someone named Nate Holzapfel. She didn't know him, but had a quick look at his profile. He was also from Utah and posted a lot of things about business and sales strategies. She accepted his request and they began messaging. Casual small talk soon developed into deeper conversations as they got to know each other. They had a lot in common. They were both Mormon, held similar political beliefs, and were both recently divorced with kids. After a few weeks of constant messaging and phone calls, Nate asked Courtney to meet up. Courtney told the Daily Beast news website that she went against her better judgment and agreed to a date at her house. They chatted for hours. Courtney got a bad feeling from Nate. However, she ignored her instincts again. Nate was clearly into her. He said all the right things, so she decided to give the romantic relationship a chance. For months, they spoke constantly, saw each other almost daily, and soon began to discuss marriage and blending their families. Nate didn't want to live in Courtney's house that she had shared with her ex-husband. Courtney was understanding and agreed to sell her house, which had been specially outfitted for her disabled son. Nate, the savvy finance man, instructed Courtney to protect her property's equity by putting it into a limited liability company, aka an LLC. However, instead of starting an LLC in Courtney's name, he said it would be easier to just put it into one of his existing LLCs. He then convinced her to sign a quit-claim deed, which would transfer ownership of the house into Nate's name. In July 2020, Nate sold Courtney's house despite her pleas to transfer ownership back to her. Courtney had no idea that Nate had put $200,000 he made from the sale into an LLP, limited liability partnership, that he shared with his wife. She had no clue that Nate was still married. He spent the money on bills and guns, as well as the lawsuit that Larry King had filed against him. By the end of 2020, Courtney had all but ended her relationship with Nate. She had only received $11,000 from him and just wanted to get the rest of her money. However, Nate skirted around the issue and persuaded her to invest in one of his businesses. So Courtney sold one of her guns as well as her car and gave the money to Nate to invest. November 2020 was the last time Courtney ever heard from Nate. He had taken the money and disappeared. 45-year-old Sammy Turnbow was at a Utah auto shop with her brand new truck in July 2020. She was chatting with an employee about how she had just started her own business. She had been diagnosed with multiple sclerosis, finalized her divorce just 1 month ago, and was the main caregiver of her disabled son. She was excited to have achieved her dream of opening her own healing center in town. something she had been working hard towards for years. As she was telling the shop staff about her new venture, another customer interrupted. A 40-something man with brown hair and a beard confessed he overheard their conversation and asked Sammy a few questions about her business. Sammy politely answered before leaving. Later that night, Sammy received a text from an unknown number. She asked who it was, and to her surprise, it was the man who had asked her about her business at the auto shop. His name was Nate. He had Googled her business and tracked down her phone number. They started texting back and forth, and Sammy learned that Nate was quite a successful businessman. They met up the very next evening at Sammy's store to swap sales tips. At first, their discussion was fairly professional, but then Nate began to pry and wanted to know more about Sammy's finances and her personal life. She didn't even know this guy's last name, so she drew the line at disclosing that information. Nate then asked to see the new truck she had brought into the auto shop the day before. Together, they walked out the back of the store, where Nate then sexually assaulted Sammy. He threatened her and told her not to come after him, as he had a team of attorneys working for him. But Sammy immediately called the police after the attack anyway. In August 2021, 53-year-old Deanne Jansen was nervously preparing her home for a first date with a man she had met on the dating app Tinder. Deanne's husband of 27 years passed away just over a year ago, and she was now working 2 jobs. She just started online dating but wasn't having much luck with it when she matched with 42-year-old Nate Holzapfel. It wasn't an instant love connection, but after 3 weeks of messaging, he managed to charm his way into a face-to-face date. As they hung out in Deanne's home, Nate started talking about himself. His father was a high-ranking member of the Mormon Church. He went on Shark Tank and became Damon John's protege, and was now running several successful businesses. Deanne was impressed, but she was concerned about a few red flags. She told the Daily Beast news website that Nate openly expressed a fondness for Adolf Hitler, but she was apparently able to overlook this, and the pair began a romantic relationship. As he had done with Courtney Morton a year ago, Nate told Deanne he was divorced, and they quickly began to talk about marriage. He made lofty promises about how his new businesses were going to take off and they would soon be living a life of luxury. He convinced Deanne to put $50,000 of her late husband's life insurance payout into one of his companies and promised her that she would get a 20x return on her investment. Nate also sold one of Deanne's cars and her AR-15 rifle and kept the proceeds. Deanne sensed there was something wrong, so she decided to Google Nate. She dug deeper past all his Shark Tank and business consulting stuff and eventually found a Reddit post about him. In the post, another Utah woman described how he had swindled her out of over $200,000. The author of that post was Courtney Morton. Deanne got in touch with Courtney, who revealed that she was currently working with detectives to arrest Nate. Only problem was that they couldn't track him down. "Well, I'm having lunch with him tomorrow," Deanne said. They notified the police and the plan was set in motion. The following day, Nate showed up to his and Deanne's usual date spot, a Carl's Jr. Waiting police arrested him and charged him with 3 counts of second-degree felony communications fraud. Deanne and Courtney were thrilled that this con artist had been caught. However, their excitement didn't last long, as Nate was able to pay the $20,000 bail just 90 minutes later. Investigators from the Utah County Attorney's Office urged other victims of Nate to get in contact with them so proper justice could be carried out. Several other women did come forward, including Sammy Turnbow. In June 2023, Nate Holzapfel's defense team reached a plea agreement with the prosecution. Nate admitted to his crimes and pleaded guilty to multiple counts of communications fraud, theft by deception, engaging in a pattern of unlawful activity, forcible sexual abuse, theft, being an unlicensed broker, and lewdness. He would have to pay back a total of $300,000 to his victims, have zero contact with any victims, receive a mental health treatment, and serve 48 months probation. He would avoid prison time and avoid having to register as a sex offender. 17 other charges and 2 out of 8 criminal cases against him would be dismissed, and his name would be removed from Utah's white-collar crime registry after completion of his probation. The deal also included a provision that the plea could be withdrawn if the judge did not sentence him to the recommended probation. The plea agreement took 18 months to negotiate. The women who Nate had defrauded and assaulted weren't happy that he wouldn't be going to prison. Sammy felt that Nate was essentially buying his way out of any real punishment. Utah County Deputy Attorney Peter Reichman explained that if they took all 8 criminal cases to trial, it would get dragged out for years, which would mean it would take years for victims to get their restitution paid, if at all. On the 4th of August 2023, Nate arrived at the courthouse in Provo, Utah for his sentencing. He smugly walked up to the waiting news crews with his 2 reluctant-looking kids by his side, fully expecting to leave as a free man. At the hearing, Courtney Morton, Sammy Turnbow, and Deanne Jansen each gave victim statements. Their stories were all similar. Nate had scoped them out as homeowners or business owners, then took advantage of them during a difficult time in their lives. They argued that Nate was a predator and a danger to society. Throughout the hearing, Nate leaned back in his seat, appearing quite comfortable. As Judge Thomas Lowe looked over the plea deal, he noted that the court had not bound itself to the agreement. He rejected the provision that the plea could be withdrawn if he did not sentence accordingly with the probation recommendation, stating that it was, quote, directly contrary to Utah law. To everyone's shock, Judge Lowe overrode the plea deal and sentenced Nate to up to 15 years in prison, plus $300,000 in restitution. Nate was handcuffed then and there and taken into custody immediately following his sentencing. The 3 victims in the courtroom were astonished at the judge's decision, but ultimately glad to see Nate finally behind bars. Samantha Azzopardi's story is equal parts bizarre and tragic. It spans over 2 decades and 3 continents, 75 aliases and personas, 100 criminal charges, and 55 convictions worldwide. She's a serial scammer, undeterred by prison terms. She was addicted to deception, yet she never made a cent from her scams. She never asked any of her victims for money. Her motivation, to this day, is entirely unknown. There's a lot of ground to cover today, so let's get into it. It was an ordinary day in Dublin's bustling city centre when 2 police officers noticed a young girl, alone, sitting outside the GPO building. She looked frail and bewildered and was clearly in a great amount of distress. When the police officers asked her name and age, she didn't speak or look up. Because of her small frame and braces on her teeth, the police estimated she was 13 or 14. As per child protection protocols, the girl was brought to a children's hospital. She refused to cooperate with any medical tests. She couldn't or wouldn't speak and didn't seem to understand English. With no name or history to go on, the mystery of the GPO girl began. The general consensus among authorities and her guardians was that she was Eastern European and was likely a victim of trafficking, smuggled into Ireland against her will. In an effort to communicate with the girl, she was given papers and pencils. She drew an airplane, a cross, a gun, and a disturbing depiction of herself in a bed surrounded by men, intensifying the fears and concerns about her situation. Authorities launched a massive investigation to determine her identity and origin. Airports, ports, and railway stations were being searched for passenger records. Police spent thousands of hours going door to door, combing through CCTV footage and reviewing missing persons reports from around Europe. Even orthodontic clinics were contacted in hopes that her braces could provide a clue. The Irish police force enlisted help from Interpol and law enforcement agencies across Europe, but still, nothing. The girl refused to have her photograph taken, which made identifying her extremely difficult. As weeks of extensive searches continued, frustration grew. In a desperate move, the police secretly snapped a photo of the girl while she was being moved between facilities. Her photo was shared to the public, the police appealing for anyone with information about her to come forward. The case exploded in the media. GPO girl's photo was on front pages and broadcast on every news outlet across Europe, with the public rallying to try and help solve the mystery. Then as the story reached the other side of the world, investigators began to receive calls from Australian authorities. Their reports were all consistent and unsettling. GPO girl was in fact not a girl, but a 25-year-old Australian woman named Samantha Azzopardi. She was known to Australian police as a con artist with a history of posing as vulnerable teenage girls. She had been visiting her mother's ex in Ireland's Midlands for 3 weeks before running off to start her elaborate ruse. For an entire month, she pretended to be a helpless teenager, the victim of heinous crimes, wasting police resources and the sympathy of an entire nation. The investigation had cost over 250,000 euros, only to result in even more questions. What was this woman's motive? She didn't stand to gain anything. It was bizarre. Samantha spoke English, yet spent an entire month mute and stuck in a hospital room, being treated like a child. Opinion was divided amongst the police and the public. The truth was shocking, and there were calls to charge Samantha criminally for wasting police time. However, in a legal sense, she had never actually made a false statement or report, as she never spoke a word. Some felt the case of the GPO girl should be treated as a mental health and welfare issue. Ultimately, no charges were brought against Samantha Azzopardi, and she was deported back to Australia. We don't know a lot about Samantha's early life, and what we do know might not even be the truth. She was born on the 21st of August, 1988 in Campbelltown, a suburb located in the southwestern outskirts of Sydney. Her parents divorced when she was 1 or 2 years old. She had one brother and 2 half-brothers. She lived with her mother and mother's partner until the age of 8, then was moved around frequently, attending 13 different primary schools according to court records. Despite this instability, Samantha achieved good grades in high school, got along with everyone, and had a close group of friends. By all accounts, she was a very normal girl, apart from her propensity for telling lies. She claimed her parents lived in America to explain their absence, and once dyed her hair red to convince classmates she was actress Lindsay Lohan. These early lies were dismissed as childish tall tales, but they marked the beginning of a pattern that would escalate dramatically in the years to come. In Queensland, November 2007, Samantha first drew the attention of authorities when she used the fake name Lindsay Lana John Benet Coughlin with the intent to defraud. Over the next few years, she was hit with a string of charges relating to the use of false identities to claim welfare benefits, and a charge of contravening a police direction and refusing to identify herself to the police. She had also been using false identities to enroll at high schools, despite being in her early 20s. In September 2010, she attempted to enroll in a Brisbane high school under the name of American actress Dakota Johnson. She claimed her parents had been killed and carried a notebook containing extensive handwritten accounts of violent abuse that had been perpetrated against her. She provided references, supposedly from a prestigious school in Switzerland, but the school confirmed that no student named Dakota Johnson had ever attended. Samantha was convicted of false representation, intent to forge false documents, and failure to provide information to police. She was fined and placed on a 12-month good behaviour bond. In 2011, Samantha moved to Perth, where she assumed the identity of Emily Skiberis, a 15-year-old gymnastics champion. She enrolled in TAFE and befriended Hope, a 16-year-old girl who had recently moved to Australia and was eager to make friends. She showed Hope her Facebook fan page, which had over 3,000 followers and dozens of photos. Emily's parents were divorced. Her twin sister lived with their mother in France, and her father worked for Interpol and was often absent. Feeling sorry for Emily, Hope invited her into her home regularly after classes, and soon, Samantha Azzopardi had ingrained herself into Hope's family. In December, Emily said she and her father would be traveling to France so her family could all be together for Christmas. Soon after her departure, Hope came across a news article posted to Emily's gymnastics Facebook page. The headline read, "Australian man kills wife and daughter in horror murder-suicide in France." According to the article, Emily's father had murdered her mother and twin sister before taking his own life, leaving Emily to discover the bodies. Emily was sent to stay with a family friend in Florida. Hope's family considered Emily to be like a second daughter and offered to formally adopt her. Emily returned to Perth and began the process of enrolling into a local school. However, school officials discovered that the birth certificate Emily provided was forged. Around the same time, a lawyer in Perth hired a private investigator to look into her after she approached him claiming to be his biological daughter. The investigator uncovered the truth. Emily Skiberis did not exist. Samantha Azzopardi was a 23-year-old serial con artist. Emily Skiberis wasn't a gymnast, and her Facebook page was fake. The followers were purchased by Samantha, and the photos, which never clearly showed her face, were stolen from a real gymnast. The elaborate story about her family in France and their supposed murder-suicide was completely made up. Samantha Azzopardi was arrested and admitted to Greylands Hospital, a mental health facility in Perth. In early 2014, Samantha returned to Ireland somehow and was hired by Alan and Ellis Fitzgerald as an au pair. She told the couple her name was Indy O'Shea and that she was 18 years old. The family adored her. Indy got along well with the couple's 2 young sons and was an excellent help around the house. However, over the next 6 weeks, Indy's behavior became odd. She said she was the illegitimate daughter of Princess Madeline of Sweden. She had trouble opening a bank account and obtaining a passport, and seemed to wear disguises whenever she went out and about. Eventually, Alan Fitzgerald discovered in her wardrobe a large wad of cash, a boarding pass that indicated she was related to Dutch royalty, a British passport with a fake name, as well as evidence that she was wiring money to Russia. Ironically, Indy told the family that her favorite film was Catch Me If You Can. Then out of the blue one day, Indy told the family her mother had died in Miami and that she had to leave. Just like that, she was gone. In May 2014, Samantha Azzopardi joined a backpacking group in Sydney under the name Annika Decker. This time, her mark was 18-year-old Emmy Bamberger, an aspiring travel writer fresh out of school on her first overseas trip. Samantha first bonded with Emmy when she said she was also vegetarian and broke off from the group to eat at a different restaurant together. The pair hit it off immediately. Emmy described herself as wide-eyed and inexperienced at the time, and was captivated by Annika Decker's stories. Annika was the daughter of Swedish spies who had been kidnapped as a child and was now under the protection of Interpol. She described how her keepers constantly moved her around the world to keep her off the radar. Emmy was initially skeptical of some of what Annika said until she received an email from an address ending in @interpol.com. The email contained unsettling details about Emmy's life, her family's full names and locations, her passwords, and other private information she had never shared online or with anyone in Australia. It also warned her that both she and Annika were being watched and needed to leave Sydney for their safety. This freaked Emmy out and convinced her that everything Annika was saying was real. At some point, Annika revealed to Emmy that she was actually only 14 years old, which triggered Emmy's protective instincts. Annika began training Emmy as if they were spies on the run, and then told her they needed to obtain fake IDs. Emmy received some documents via email, went to the RMS as directed, lied about her situation, and successfully obtained a new driver's license under the name Amy Fisher. Annika and Emmy traveled interstate to Brisbane, where they checked into a hostel to lay low. One night, Annika woke up complaining of severe head pain. Concerned, Emmy called an ambulance and on the way to the hospital told the medics that they were sisters. However, at the hospital, police arrived and began questioning Emmy, suspecting she might have kidnapped Annika. They became even more suspicious when Emmy admitted to obtaining the fake ID, and she was detained overnight. Yet Emmy was so deeply tangled in Annika's lies that her main fear was getting in trouble with Interpol for leaving Annika alone. Emmy was released the next morning and given a fine for the fake ID. She rushed back to the hospital where Annika was waiting outside, her catheter still in her arm. Annika insisted they flee to a safe house in Sydney, so the pair promptly boarded a plane and travelled to Campbelltown, Samantha Azzopardi's hometown. The so-called safe house turned out to be a shipping container in the backyard of a rural property, fitted with only basic amenities. The two stayed in there for 8 days without hot water or Wi-Fi. Annika told Emmy that 2 Interpol agents were stationed outside to protect them, but that they were strictly forbidden from speaking to them. Emmy had no way of contacting her family and was terrified that she would never be able to go home to see them again. But when Emmy's tourist visa was about to expire, Annika allowed her American companion to leave. Emmy left most of her belongings, including her $1,000 camera, in the safe house, believing she would return once her visa was renewed. However, her visa was denied due to her run-in with the police, and she was deported back to the United States. Shortly after arriving in California, Emmy received a message from Annika, instructing her to meet in Canada with the plane ticket already paid for. Emmy complied. Once in Canada, Annika gave Emmy a card and a pair of earrings, claiming they were fitted with GPS tracking devices. The pair checked into a backpackers hostel and wrote down their names in the guest book, Annika from Sweden and Emmy from the United States. A minor detail that would ultimately lead to Samantha's undoing. That night, 2 Swedish backpackers approached the girls and greeted Annika in Swedish. When Annika couldn't respond, Emmy finally realized that something was seriously wrong. The next day, Annika told Emmy they needed to part ways and asked to be dropped off at a bus station in Calgary, where Interpol agents would come to collect her. After 4 months, Emmy's crazy journey with Annika finally came to an end. The two never saw each other again. Years later, Emmy would revisit this chapter of her life and uncover the creepy truth about everything. She was shocked to learn that the 14-year-old Annika Decker was in reality 26-year-old Australian Samantha Azzopardi, and that she had been one of her latest victims. Emmy managed to get in touch with Samantha's brother, who told her that the Sydney safe house where they had been hiding was actually Samantha's real home in Campbelltown. The two men who were supposedly Interpol agents were in fact Samantha's brother and father. Neither of them had any idea what Samantha had been doing. They assumed she had brought a friend home and found it odd that Emmy never spoke to them. As for the highly personal information emailed to Emmy, it turned out that Samantha was an exceptionally skilled internet stalker. She had meticulously researched Emmy, combing through her social media to figure out all of her friends and family, then was able to simply guess some of her passwords. Immediately after saying her goodbyes to Emmy Bamberger, Samantha Azzopardi launched into her next con. On September 16, 2014, Samantha, now aged 26, walked into the Alexandria Community Health Centre in Calgary, presenting herself as a 14-year-old named Aurora Hepburn. She complained of nausea and vomiting and told staff she was a victim of abduction, sexual assault, and torture. She said she was Danish and that her mother had forced her to live a nomadic life in a cult, preventing her from receiving an education or healthcare. Despite this, she claimed she could speak multiple languages and mentioned she was looking for her sister Daisy. Staff admitted her to hospital and called Child Protective Services. Over the next 2 weeks, investigators and healthcare workers spent hours with Aurora trying to establish the extent of her abuse and help her recover. Meanwhile, police discovered a missing persons report filed in Fort McMurray, a city more than 700 kilometers away. The report was filed by Daisy Hepburn and stated that her younger sister Aurora was missing and in danger. As a major investigation was launched, police noticed eerie similarities to the GPO girl story in Ireland about a year ago. That case also involved a mysterious 14-year-old girl who claimed to have been abused and trafficked, but then turned out to be a hoax. Aurora's fingerprints were taken and distributed to international databases. A match in Ireland quickly confirmed that Aurora Hepburn was another creation of Samantha Azzopardi's. Unlike in Dublin, this time Samantha cooperated with investigators. She admitted her true identity and confessed to making up the entire story, including the missing persons report. She was Daisy Hepburn all along too. The deception cost Canadian authorities over $150,000 in expenses for hospital care, child protection services, and the police investigation. Psychiatric evaluations were conducted while Samantha was in custody, and multiple experts concluded that she was lucid and showed no signs of mental illness. Her actions were deemed deliberate and calculated. She was charged with public mischief and sentenced to 2 months in jail, which she had already served. She was deported back to Australia in December 2014. In 2015, Samantha was charged with fraudulently obtaining a passport under the alias Georgia McAuliffe. This was the passport she had used the first time she travelled to Ireland. The court was told that she was, quote, severely disturbed and had experienced a very disadvantaged upbringing, and that her prospects for rehabilitation were uncertain. Samantha pleaded guilty and was convicted, but given a 2-year good behaviour bond and warned she would face prison time if she reoffended. But to no one's surprise, Samantha did not comply with the good behaviour bond. In late 2016, Samantha reappeared in Sydney's inner west as 13-year-old Harper Hart. An unassuming couple found her wandering the streets appearing lost and distressed and took her in as their foster child. Samantha used a Californian birth certificate to enroll at the Good Shepherd School, which supports students who struggle in mainstream education. She said she was under the US government witness protection program and was a victim of sexual assault and trafficking. Harper was vulnerable and illiterate, so school staff worked tirelessly to provide her with special support. However, some teachers began to suspect that Harper was older than she said she was. The school's principal then received a peculiar phone call from a doctor confirming Harper's age, citing bone scan results. The strangeness of the situation and severity of Harper's allegations led the school to contact authorities. The police determined that Harper's birth certificate was a forgery, but doubted that a 13-year-old could have created such sophisticated documents, raising concerns that Harper might be the victim of a kidnapping or ring. police covertly took photos of Harper Hart and realised that this could be the same person from the GPO girl case in Dublin. Harper's foster family were reluctant to cooperate with police, as Harper had alleged she had been assaulted by a New South Wales police officer. Investigators were able to take Harper's fingerprints from her schoolwork, and sure enough, they matched Samantha azzopardi. When Samantha was arrested, police noted that her freckles had been drawn on with makeup to give her a more childlike look. The teachers and social workers who had dedicated weeks to trying to help Harper Hart reported feeling betrayed and humiliated that she had been a fully literate 28-year-old woman the whole time. Samantha's latest con had cost the state $155,000 in support services and police investigations. Not only had Samantha fooled school staff and her foster parents, with whom she stayed for a year until her court date, she had tricked a French backpacker named Lucy into calling the foster father pretending to be a United States Supreme Court official. Lucy was later tricked into posing as a doctor and calling the school principal to confirm Harper's supposed age. In July 2017, Samantha was sentenced to 12 months in prison for obtaining financial advantage by deception. For the first time, Samantha's mother had attended court in support of her daughter. She spoke with the media saying her daughter's situation was, quote, heartbreaking, and described Samantha as a sweet, adventurous, and independent child, but offered no further insight into her behavior. 5 months into her sentence, Samantha appealed her conviction. A detective who had investigated Samantha described her as highly intelligent and like a method actor, with her ability to use a victim from one con to support her bona fides in another con as, quote, quite ingenious. The judge concluded that Samantha understood the difference between right and wrong. He noted the significant psychological impact her deceptions had on victims, many of whom had bent over backwards to help her, believing she had suffered serious trauma. The appeal was denied, and Samantha remained in custody until her release in December 2017. In July 2018, professional basketball player Tom Jarvis and his wife Jazzy, a former lawyer, were searching for an au pair to help care for their 2-year-old daughter, Clementine. Living in Brisbane at the time, the family connected with 17-year-old Harper Hernandez through an au pair website. You guessed correctly, Harper was actually 31-year-old Samantha azzopardi. During their initial video call, Harper told the Jarvises she'd gone to boarding school in Dubai, her father was a pilot, and her mother was a lawyer in San Francisco. The Jarvises felt that Harper was a perfectly pleasant and responsible young woman and decided to hire her. They welcomed her into their Brisbane home and gave her a parental responsibility over their daughter. They paid her $250 per week on top of her room and board, and also lent her a bank card under Jazzy Jarvis's name for groceries and errands. When the Jarvises relocated to Melbourne in December 2018, Harper moved with them. She had bonded with their daughter, helped around the house, and even came along to extended family events. Jazzy later said about Samantha, "I treated her like my daughter. She was part of the family." However, after about a year as the Jarvises' au pair, cracks started to appear in Harper's story. She was always shifty when it came to any questions about her background. She refused to ever have her photo taken, and her compulsion to lie for no reason became apparent. She had once told the family that she was allergic to cane sugar, yet Jazzy had found lolly wrappers in her bed. In May 2019, Jazzy received a message from a group of girls who said they'd seen Clementine with a girl named Marley, who had claimed to be married to Tom Jarvis and worked as a casting agent. When the Jarvises confronted Harper, she got defensive and spun a convoluted story to explain away the accusation. The Jarvises decided they were no longer comfortable having Harper living in their home and let her go. On her way out, Samantha stole Jazzy's bank card and iPad. Jazzy later found out that her former au pair had been subcontracting her childcare duties, leaving baby Clementine with complete strangers for hours at a time. Then on July 5th, 2019, Jazzy received another unsolicited message, this time from a woman named Tiana. She asked if Jazzy knew someone named Coco, who was presenting herself as a talent scout in Melbourne. Tiana sent her a photo of this Coco person, and to Jazzy's shock, she was looking at the face of her former au pair. While still working as an au pair for the Jarvis family, Samantha azzopardi was busy carrying out another separate con. This time, she was Marley, a casting agent for the United Talent Agency, which does exist. Her target was a Melbourne family who responded to an online ad seeking children to audition for a voice role in a cartoon. Marley told the family that their 12-year-old daughter, an aspiring actress, had a lot of potential. She offered to mentor and train the girl for a role in an upcoming Australian version of the TV show Punk'd. In April 2019, Marley convinced the family to allow their daughter to travel with her to Sydney, unsupervised, to attend auditions. Parents of the Year award right there. During the trip, Marley put the girl through what she described as acting training, sending her into various locations including Legal Aid Centre, Centrelink, and the Children's Hospital. At the Centrelink, the girl was instructed to write on a piece of paper that she was seeing ghosts of people from her past. At the Legal Aid, Marley provided her with a fake ID and birth certificate to present. To reward the girl and maintain her trust, Marley would give her expensive clothing and other gifts. The family realized something was not right and believed that their daughter was being groomed and ended up reporting the situation to the police. In July 2019, on the New South Wales Central Coast, 13-year-old aspiring model and actress Georgia Beveridge received a DM on Instagram where she promoted herself with various modeling photos. The message was from someone named Coco Palmer, who was interested in hiring Georgia for an anti-bullying campaign. Excited by the opportunity, Georgia provided Coco with her mother Mel's phone number. When Mel spoke to Coco over the phone, Coco introduced herself as a talent scout for Elite Model Management. She claimed to have come across Georgia's profile online and wanted to hire her for a short film. A quick Google confirmed that Elite Model Management was a legitimate agency and Coco Palmer was a real model with a visible online profile. Feeling reassured, Mel agreed to take Georgia to Sydney to meet Coco in person. Coco outlined her plans for Georgia, saying she would star in a short film and participate in a photo shoot at the end of the week. Both Georgia and Mel were ecstatic. During the Sydney trip, Coco asked to take Georgia shopping for costume fittings. Mel allowed them to go alone but stayed close by. Later that evening as they drove home, Mel asked Georgia about their time at the shops. Georgia revealed that Coco asked her to call Lifeline, a crisis support hotline, as a part of an acting exercise. Coco had instructed Georgia to pretend to be an abused girl named River and to make up a heartbreaking story. Georgia complied until the Lifeline operator grew concerned, prompting Coco to grab the phone and abruptly end the call. A few days later, Georgia, Mel, and her older sister Tiana flew to Melbourne for what they believed would be the film shoot. The family bonded with Coco during the week, even dyeing Georgia's hair together in their hotel room. Mel and Coco seemed to hit it off, discovering strange coincidences in their lives. Mel's dog was named Coco. Coco and Mel's husband both had leukemia. When Coco said that Mel's grandson looked like a Bruce, Mel said that her father's name was Bruce. Of course, Samantha azzopardi had targeted this family specifically and had done extensive research to gain their trust and prey on the family's ambitions for Georgia. In Melbourne, Coco continued her so-called acting exercises, which became increasingly strange. She dressed Georgia in adult corporate clothing, applied makeup to her to look bruised and battered, and had her wear a wireless earphone and lapel microphone. Georgia was to enter various offices around the city and once again say she was an abused girl named River. At one point, Coco made Georgia perform another strange task, wiping down foreign currency. Georgia grew increasingly uncomfortable and broke down, telling her mother she did not want to continue. Mel encouraged Georgia to push herself out of her comfort zone and continue in order to break into the industry. At the end of the week, Coco, Georgia, Mel, and Tiana moved into a hostel in Melbourne CBD. While Coco and Georgia were out one day, the hostel's front desk asked Mel for additional identification. Mel explained that the room was booked under Coco Palmer's name. There was a discrepancy. The booking was made under a different name, and they showed Mel a photocopy of the bank card used. The name on the card was Jazzy Jarvis. Alarm bells ringing, Mel rushed back to the room, googled Jazzy Jarvis, and her stomach dropped when photos of the real Jazzy Jarvis and her family popped up. Tiana messaged Jazzy on Instagram, who responded that she did in fact know Coco, except she knew her as 17-year-old Harper, her former au pair who had stolen her bank card. Mel immediately called the police, but they weren't much help. Tiana then called Georgia, urging her to stay calm and find an excuse to get back to the hostel as quickly as possible. When Coco and Georgia returned, Mel demanded answers, blocking the door to prevent Coco from leaving. Tiana secretly filmed the confrontation, capturing one of the only known videos of Samantha azzopardi.
What's going on?
What do you mean? I don't believe you are who you say you are. I don't believe
even though
you
you
from
go
your
through all my
agency.
stuff.
I don't believe you are who you say you are. He doesn't even know who you are. He wants to come in and call the police.
He's kicking us out, I think.
Kicking us out? What, because you went up there and go, I don't know who this person is?
No, I just said, has Coco checked in? And he said, who's Coco? Yeah, why did she have to sit away from you on the tram?
She doesn't have to.
You told her to.
No, we get on like at the same time.
And you told her she can't sit near you.
Like the tram stop.
Yeah, I said when to get on. One just right there at the...
Why can't she sit near you?
Because I want her to do the independent stuff. I feel like I'm now being interrogated.
Yeah, because that's how I...
Because we're about to get police called on us and our things searched. Do you have any ID?
Yeah, but I feel like now I'm being a bit... Can I go talk to him
I've
first?
asked you 3 times for ID today.
No,
and
you
you haven't
actually
even given me.
haven't.
I said you haven't even showed me ID.
I will show you my ID. Like, we'll show you our ID.
Do you have any Coco ID?
Yeah, I do.
So can you show me some ID then?
No, you can call the police, even though I haven't done anything wrong to your daughter.
I know you haven't, but if you're drug, which is what I feel you're doing with my daughter, there's
drug.
Well, I don't know, because it's very secretive. You have hidden microphones, cameras. You're
There's...
wiping down money. You're wiping down a book from corner to corner. She told me.
Like, how are we even getting home? Like, we don't have any proof of tickets or anything.
Oh, I got your tickets.
But we haven't seen anything. Like, you're just saying, yeah, you can go at 5 and then...
And you're very reluctant to show me ID.
Like, we can't even see ID or anything.
Very reluctant.
This is like very interrogative.
Yeah, but that's how we feel. We feel really scared.
Show me ID. We can sort this out now.
What? No, I'm sorry, but I didn't come into this and have to pay for everything, including the daughter's stuff, to come here.
Oh, well, that's the lengths people will go to if that's what you're doing.
Have I ever got you to drive?
Yeah, but you're getting her to drop off bags and then pick it back up.
Can we see the Medicare card?
Oh, I'm so sorry, guys. I don't know.
So do you have our tickets to get home now that you're walking
I do.
away?
I do have your tickets.
And where are they though?
I will email them to you.
But could you email them on the spot? Because what if we are stuck here with a sick baby?
You're not stuck here.
But can't we have the tickets right now? Like,
I'm going to leave and then I'm going to get it.
But what if we don't get the
You'll
tickets,
get
Coco?
The tickets.
And we still won't show me ID.
I'm being like...
So can you wait here till the police get here?
Why would I need to wait here until the police get here?
I'm giving him all the information that I
Okay,
know.
give me a phone.
Samantha gave vague and evasive answers before leaving abruptly, never providing the family with the return flight she had promised. The Jarvis and Beveridge families both went to the media with their stories. Both Jazzy and Mel posted a rare clear photo of Samantha on their social media, which got widely circulated. But the increased awareness wasn't enough to stop Samantha from orchestrating one of her most serious crimes to date. In November 2019, a French couple living in Melbourne, Michael and Camille, hired a woman who introduced herself as Sucker to be their live-in au pair. They tasked her with looking after their 2 young daughters, a 10-month-old baby and a 4-year-old. One day, Samantha told the couple she was taking the children for a picnic at a nearby park. Instead, she took them more than 100 kilometers away to the regional city of Bendigo. On the way up, she met up with a French backpacker who she recruited through a fake online job ad. Samantha changed into a school uniform, a blue check dress, and a blue felt hat in an attempt to disguise herself as a young girl. CCTV footage captured her walking around the area carrying the baby in a harness while the 4-year-old walked behind her. She led the group into the Headspace Mental Health Center. Samantha told staff she was a 14-year-old who had been sexually assaulted by her uncle and was pregnant. She had even arranged for an unknown person to call pretending to be her father to corroborate the story. However, a staff member immediately recognized her and called the police. Samantha bolted out of the center. Police officers chased her through the streets of Bendigo before finally arresting her in the cosmetics section of a Myer department store, where she was attempting to ditch the 2 children. Samantha was charged with 2 counts of child stealing and 1 count of providing a false name. She remained in custody for 18 months while waiting for her trial. In May 2021, Samantha pleaded guilty to all charges. However, as she had already spent over 500 days in custody, she was immediately released. Between 2021 and 2024, Samantha Azzopardi was jailed 4 more times for impersonating abused teenagers. In August 2022, Samantha claimed to be a 15-year-old cult survivor, Eleanor Harris, but police figured out fairly quickly who she actually was. She was sentenced to a 3-year community corrections order, requiring her to undergo mental health assessments and psychological assistance for the duration of the order. Samantha failed to comply. In November 2022, Samantha pretended to be a 14-year-old French victim of sex trafficking under the name Emily Bamberger, a name she had taken from one of her earlier victims. She claimed she had fled abusive parents in France and was now staying with a foster family. She led police on a wild goose chase for 9 hours around Sydney's eastern suburbs to look for the family, but obviously they didn't exist. She was sentenced to 17 months in jail, marking her 100th criminal charge in Australia, but she was released just 10 days later after an appeal found the original sentence to be too harsh. Samantha's lawyer argued, quote, "In none of these offences is it clear that she stood to gain anything, apart perhaps from some care. It would appear that she is trying to obtain the care that she feels she never received as a child, now as an adult, by making these fictitious accounts. No one should go to jail for that." The judge agreed that Samantha didn't have any clear motives and urged her to seek mental health treatment. In 2023, Samantha, now 35, resurfaced as Hattie Lee, a 17-year-old Belgian victim of domestic violence. She had coerced another woman, a Danish backpacker, into accompanying her to crisis centres and refuge homes across multiple states over several months. Samantha initially tricked the backpacker through an online job ad posing as a movie executive, claiming they were producing travel videos that require them to stay in low-budget accommodation. Samantha also told the backpacker that her parents were movie directors. In August 2023, Samantha opened a credit card in the name of a French national whose identity she had stolen. She later used the card to pay for cosmetic freckle tattooing at a beauty salon in Melbourne to make her appear younger. Over the next couple of months, the pair got themselves placed in various emergency housing locations in Melbourne. Samantha faked a pregnancy test, spoke in broken English, and convinced caseworkers she was a trafficking victim who had been abused by her stepfather. She robbed real domestic violence survivors of $20,000 worth of aid and critical resources. In October 2024, Samantha pleaded guilty to 6 charges, including obtaining financial advantage by deception and dealing in the proceeds of crime. A Melbourne court sentenced her to 2 years imprisonment, but she is already eligible for parole. There are a lot of differing opinions when it comes to Samantha's motives and mental health. She's clearly a deeply troubled person, but something seems to be stopping her from getting the help she needs. Throughout her life, Samantha has undergone numerous psychiatric evaluations, receiving a range of diagnoses that attempt to explain her behaviour. In 2015, when Samantha was charged with passport fraud, she was evaluated by forensic psychologist Dr. Susan Pullman, who concluded that she met the criteria for dissociative identity disorder due to a history of complex trauma. It was suggested that Samantha may not even recall some of the actions she carried out while in a dissociative state. However, forensic psychiatrist Dr. Jacqueline Rakov disagreed, pointing out the careful planning and high level of organization required to pull off Samantha's cons. Dr. Rakov diagnosed Samantha with severe borderline personality disorder, which is often linked to childhood trauma and characterized by extremely poor self-identity. Dr. Rakov also diagnosed Samantha with a rare and poorly understood condition called pseudologia fantastica, which is essentially extreme compulsive lying for no tangible gain. Dr. Rakov believes Samantha's lies and narratives were not motivated by money, fame, or notoriety, but involved saving or looking after children, which could be linked to Samantha's own experience of childhood trauma. Psychiatry professor Dr. Richard Friesen suggested that Samantha may also have factitious disorder, formerly known as Munchausen syndrome, as evidenced by her ploys to get admitted into hospitals. When Samantha started getting older and could no longer pass as a teenager, she shifted to using children like 13-year-old Georgia Beveridge to act out abuse narratives, which could indicate factitious disorder imposed on another, Munchausen syndrome by proxy. The 2023 RTE podcast, Finding Samantha, gained access to early records from her court documents, which total an unbelievable 24,000 pages. In 2006, when Samantha was 17, she stayed at a mental health facility for 6 months. A report from a psychologist session with Samantha and her mother during this time revealed that Samantha had suffered severe physical abuse at the hands of her mother. Her mother admitted to assaulting Samantha on multiple occasions and even confessed that she once nearly killed her daughter. Further reports from Samantha's teenage years paint a picture of constant instability and abuse. Medical records show that she presented to Campbelltown Hospital due to self-harm, memory loss, confusion, and suicide attempts. She was diagnosed with major depressive disorder, complex post-traumatic stress disorder, dissociative conversion disorder, and borderline personality disorder. The experts agree that Samantha's pattern of presenting as a girl between age 14 and 16 suggests deeply rooted trauma from that period of her life. One theory is that after suffering abuse, she experienced care and love for the first time and is now repeatedly attempting to relive those feelings, to recreate a time when she felt supported. Another theory is that Samantha may have reported her abuse as a teenager, but was not believed or did not receive the help she needed. Her cons could be attempts to recreate scenarios where she is validated and cared for, an endless cycle of reliving past traumas in search of the support she was denied as a child. Samantha has reportedly rejected all of her diagnoses. It is also unknown how Samantha was able to fund her constant traveling or why she seemed to always be in possession of foreign currency. It truly never ceases to amaze me, the lies people will tell to get ahead. Lies that span decades, manipulate others, and are so preposterous that you would never think anyone could make them up. If there's one thing I've learned from making YouTube videos about scammers, it's that people will lie about anything. Stephane Bourgoin, for example, was a celebrated criminologist and true crime writer in France with a very impressive resume. He had interviewed more serial killers than anyone else on Earth and amassed a legion of fans who ate up every gory detail in his books and documentaries. Only problem, his credentials were completely fake. Stephane Bourgoin was born on the 14th of March 1953 in Paris. He grew up in a wealthy household with live-in servants in an apartment that overlooked the Arc de Triomphe. His father was a decorated French war hero in both World Wars, who later became an internationally renowned engineer and high-ranking intelligence officer. His mother, originally from Germany, served as an interpreter and double agent for the French resistance during World War II. Young Stephane didn't have any siblings, and his parents' turbulent relationship sent him seeking escapism at the cinema. He dropped out of high school and would spend entire days at the movie theater watching films back to back. He became obsessed with the United States and dreamed of making it big in Hollywood. In his 20s, he made frequent trips to the US to soak up American culture and work on low-budget films. Eventually, he returned to France, continuing to work on low-budget film sets while writing columns about B-movies and horror films. He also wrote scripts and assisted on a few adult films. Around this time, Stephane discovered that his father had a secret second family living just a few blocks away, along with two older half-sisters he had never known about. Needing a distraction from this revelation, he immersed himself deeper in films and books. Stephane loved storytelling, creating narratives, and constructing worlds that didn't exist. Stephane started working at the Third Eye bookstore in Paris, eventually purchasing it in 1981. The store was a cramped second-hand shop specializing in books about cinema, obscure sci-fi, detective novels, and rare crime fanzines. Stephane's own apartment was similarly filled to the brim with his huge collection of VHS tapes, which included recorded news segments about natural disasters and gruesome crimes. He also collected crime scene photos of corpses that he liked to show his house guests. By the 1980s, Stephane had established himself as a prominent editor, known for publishing translations of major British and American crime writers. He became particularly interested in serial killers and developed an encyclopedic knowledge of this subject. He had been a lifelong lover of American culture, and what's more quintessentially American than serial killers? In 1991, Stephane was invited to join a small documentary crew working on a film about serial killers. Silence of the Lambs had just been released, serial killers had gone mainstream, and audiences wanted to learn more about these real-world villains. The crew's first stop was the FBI headquarters to interview renowned profiler John Douglas, the creator of the FBI's Behavioral Analysis Unit and author of Mindhunter, a book that later inspired one of the best shows to ever get prematurely cancelled by Netflix. Stephane took the lead on the interviews as he was the most fluent in English, and he impressed John Douglas with his ability to recall minute details from decades-old cases. Next, the crew traveled to Florida to interview two convicted killers, Gerard Schaefer and Otis Toole. The plan was to ask deeper questions that delved into the killers' understanding of their own crimes, their impact on victims, and whether they felt any remorse. However, Stephane went off script, failed to ask the pre-planned questions, and instead asked the killers to recount their crimes and describe their perverse fantasies. At one point, he brought copies of Schaefer's book for him to sign and got a photo together. Stephane also told Otis Toole, aka the Jacksonville Cannibal, that he had tried his barbecue sauce recipe, which supposedly called for a cup of blood. The crew then flew to California to interview convicted serial killer Ed Kemper, where Stephane eagerly listened as Kemper spoke nonchalantly about the most heinous crimes imaginable. Stephane's conduct during these interviews left the rest of the crew deeply uncomfortable. They saw him behave more like an overexcited fanboy meeting his idols than a professional documentarian. The film, an investigation into deviance, premiered on French public television in 1992. To make it suitable for broadcast, the goriest sections of the interviews had to be edited out. Stephane seized the opportunity to capitalize on the public's growing fascination with serial killers and took the unedited tapes to launch his career as a serial killer expert. He began making TV appearances where he presented and commented on the raw footage, offering behind-the-scenes insights into his encounters with these violent criminals. Turned out there was quite an appetite for French-language true crime content, so Stephane quickly began writing and publishing books. Within just a year of the film's initial TV broadcast, Stephane had published books on Albert DeSalvo, the Boston Strangler, Jeffrey Dahmer, and Jack the Ripper, as well as a dense 1,000-page compendium of names, dates, and details of crimes simply titled Serial Killers. Stephane's books were hits and established him as the go-to guy in France for anything to do with serial killers. Over the next 30 years or so, Stephane wrote 70 more books, produced dozens of documentaries, and made countless TV appearances. His work became immensely popular because he didn't hold back. He gave the people what they wanted: the grisly, gory, stomach-churning details of the crimes and fantasies of the world's most notorious killers. Throughout his career, Stephane interviewed a total of 77 serial killers, including David Berkowitz, aka the Son of Sam, hospital orderly Donald Harvey, and killer clown John Wayne Gacy. Stephane bragged that no one else on the planet had met as many serial killers as he had. He seemed to have a special gift for getting them to open up to him, and even got a few of them to give confessions. Anytime a violent crime or murder made news headlines, he'd be invited to do TV or radio segments to share his insights. He once claimed to have appeared on 84 TV shows in a single month. On top of his media appearances, Stephane traveled across France to attend talks, conferences, and book festivals. Fans would line up for hours at his book signings to meet the superstar of French true crime. Stephane spent a year working with the FBI, training as an independent investigator. He later passed on his expertise at the French law enforcement training centers and created the country's first serial killer profiling unit. He was even invited to lecture at France's National School for Judges and Prosecutors. In his home, he had accumulated thousands of case files he used as source material for his books. His writing was often repetitive. He often wrote multiple books and essays on the same case, but his audience didn't seem to mind. In Who Killed the Black Dahlia, his second book about the unsolved murderer of American woman Elizabeth Short, he claimed to have identified the killer, though the FBI still lists the case as unsolved. It didn't matter if Stephane's book didn't have much deep analysis or opinion. As long as the gruesome details were there, his fans ate it up. Another fun fact about Stephane, he named one of his cats Bundy. So why did Stephane dedicate his life to studying serial killers and writing about them? Around the start of the 2000s, he began sharing more about his personal life, revealing a tragic backstory that seemed to explain his obsession. He shared that the driving force behind his work was the murder of his wife, Eileen, at the hands of a serial killer. According to Stephane, the two met in Los Angeles in the mid-1970s while he was working on film sets. In 1976, he returned to their LA apartment after an out-of-town trip and discovered Eileen's dismembered body. 2 years later, police told him that Eileen's killer had been caught and had confessed to several other murders. The term serial killer wasn't common back then, and there wasn't much information available about the subject. Stephane explained that this lack of information compelled him to do his own research to better understand the man who killed his wife and others like him. This heartbreaking story garnered a lot of sympathy for Stephane and made his obsession with serial killers not only understandable, but even admirable. It humanized him, presenting him as someone seeking answers to unimaginable trauma. By 2019, Stephane Bourgoin had solidified his reputation as France's preeminent expert on serial killers. The true crime genre had always been popular, but it's really exploded in recent years thanks to several popular viral podcasts and documentary series. There were more true crime fans than ever on social media, discussing cases, debating theories, and even working together to solve real-world crimes. Stephane's Facebook page had tens of thousands of followers, most of them young women. Stephane once posted on Facebook that he had been given the remains of serial killer Gerard Schaefer. He wrote, "To each person who buys my book, I will offer a small bag containing a little piece of Schaefer. Fingernails, hair, ear, kneecap, skin, bones, etc." He also added that his female fans would be given priority. With more eyes on his work than ever, Stephane began to face some scrutiny, and internet sleuths started noticing some discrepancies across his work. Details, dates, or locations in a certain case would be different. What started as quiet whispers of suspicion soon grew loud, and about 30 former fans formed an offshoot Facebook group called the Fourth Eye Corporation, a reference to the bookshop Stephane used to own. The group, who were strangers from around the world, most of them anonymous, began to coordinate a joint investigation into Stephane. They pored over his books and articles, analysed his TV appearances, and reached out to his former colleagues. They even contacted some of the serial killers he claimed to have interviewed. And what they uncovered was lies upon lies. Yeah, nearly everything I've told you about Stephane's career so far hasn't been true, so sorry about that. Stephane often bragged about personally interviewing 77 serial killers, describing in detail the killer's mannerisms and his techniques for manipulating the world's greatest and most dangerous manipulators. But sometimes the details from Stephane's stories didn't match up. For example, sometimes Stephane said he had interviewed Edmund Kemper only briefly, while other times he claimed to have spent hundreds of hours with him. The number, 77 serial killers, was also suspiciously high. John Douglas, the FBI profiling pioneer, himself had only interviewed 36. Fourth Eye could only dig up video evidence of Stephane interviewing 8 serial killers, so they wrote to prisons and the alleged killers themselves. Stephane had claimed that David Berkowitz, the son of Sam, had confessed to him that he'd made up his demonic dog story to make himself appear insane. But Berkowitz, through an intermediary, denied ever meeting Stephane. In fact, the majority of killers Stephane claimed to have interviewed said they had no idea who he was. Stephane's anecdote about meeting Charles Manson in the early 80s, where the short-statured cult leader perched on the back of his chair to assert dominance, that was lifted straight out of John Douglas's memoir Mindhunter. When the Fourth Eye wrote to John Douglas, he responded, quote, "Stephane Bourgoin is delusional and an imposter." Fourth Eye's investigation found that Stephane's early books were heavily plagiarized and contained direct translations of English-language crime books that hadn't been published in French. Stephane also appropriated real detectives' and profilers' experiences, inserting himself into their stories as if he were the one who lived them. In 1999, Stephane traveled to South Africa to film a documentary with renowned profiler Mickey Pistorius. During the shoot, Mickey gave Stephane a copy of the manuscript for her unpublished memoir, hoping he could give her some advice as this was her first book. Later, after production on the film was done, Stephane told Mickey that he had written a book about their time shooting together in South Africa. Mickey didn't speak or read French and trusted that Stephane was telling the truth. However, Fourth Eye Corporation discovered that not only did Stephane's book contain pages and pages directly copied out of her book, he also replaced her with himself in several stories, including claiming to have obtained the confession of killer Stuart Wilkin. Nearly everything about Stephane was a lie. He never trained with the FBI. The credentials he once posted on social media were nothing more than a visitor's badge and an FBI t-shirt from a gift shop. He certainly never possessed the remains of Gerard Schaefer. Fourth Eye confirmed that the killer's ashes were with his family in the United States. There were also the other random lies that had nothing to do with furthering his career. In one Facebook post, Stephane claimed to have once lived next door to American author Stephen King. He also once said he played professional soccer for 7 years with the Red Star Football Club. This was debunked by the club. Surprisingly, the stories of his parents being war heroes turned out to be 100% true and was verified by American journalist Lauren Collins and National Geographic. Then there was Eileen, Stephane's wife, who was supposedly murdered by a serial killer and the driving force behind his entire career. Fourth Eye was suspicious if this woman had ever existed. Over the years, Stephane had variously referred to her as his wife, girlfriend, companion, and sometimes simply just his friend. He also gave inconsistent accounts of the violence inflicted upon her. Stephane had always maintained that he kept Eileen's surname and the name of her killer private out of respect for her family, yet he never refrained from repeating the graphic details of her torture and death. Fourth Eye searched for female victims of serial killers in California in the 1970s, but never found anyone who resembled the woman in Stephane's photo, who had a distinctive crooked front tooth. Stephane mentioned on multiple occasions that Eileen's killer was currently on death row. Fourth Eye examined California's public list of death row inmates, but none of them matched the circumstances Stephane had described. On top of all that, French public records show that Stephane had been married once to a French woman, but they divorced in 1995. So could Stephane have really made up this big sob story about his wife being a victim of a serial killer? This backstory was central to his public image, gave credibility to his work, and provided a compelling reason for his serial killer obsession. All those times he went on TV playing the sad widower, describing the horrifying moment he discovered his dismembered wife, letting everyone give him their sympathy and condolences. Was it all fake? And if Eileen wasn't real, then who was the woman in the photo? In autumn 2019, the Fourth Eye Corporation contacted French media outlets with their findings, but they were pretty much ignored. After all, Stephane was an esteemed author and criminologist, while they were a mostly anonymous group of internet sleuths. Fourth Eye took matters into their own hands and released their findings in a series of YouTube videos titled Serial Mytho. These videos laid out all the evidence to expose Stephane's decades of lies. The videos gained some traction with the French-speaking true crime community. Die-hard Stephane fans defended their favorite author, while others piled on to try and uncover more of his lies. One of the more outlandish theories that came out of this involved Stephane's pseudonym Etienne Jailloux, which he sometimes used to publish his more disturbing, transgressive books. Some fans worked out that the name was a near anagram for J'ai tué Eileen, which translates to I killed Eileen. This coincidence fueled speculation that Stephane himself might be a killer. In February 2020, Stephane announced he would be closing his Facebook page. He didn't directly address Fourth Eye's allegations, but he wrote that he was the target of a, quote, campaign of cyber harassment and hatred. He also tried to have the Serial Mytho videos taken down by filing copyright strikes against them. But there was finally enough buzz about the scandal that the mainstream French media took notice, and a wave of articles and news reports came out about it. A few months later, Stephane broke his silence and gave a series of phone interviews to the publication Paris Match. He confessed that he faked his FBI credentials and exaggerated and embellished his stories for better entertainment value. He admitted that he didn't exactly interview 77 serial killers, but he only saw them briefly in prison corridors or in the exercise yards. I don't know a whole lot about prisons, but it seems highly unlikely that a visitor would be allowed to casually walk past a dangerous murderer in a maximum security prison. The biggest revelation came when Stephane addressed the story of Eileen. He admitted that Eileen didn't exist, but insisted the story wasn't a complete lie. In the 1970s, while living in the US, Stephane claimed he met 24-year-old Susan Bickrist, a bartender and aspiring cosmetologist, who supplemented her income through sex work. Stephane said they met up a few times before she was murdered by serial killer Gerald Stano in 1975. So that's why he transformed a few intimate encounters with a young woman into the fictional tragedy of losing a wife, because he didn't want people to know that he had engaged the services of a sex worker. However, the Fourth Eye Corporation wasn't convinced. The timeline didn't add up. Gerald Stano wasn't apprehended until 1980 and didn't confess to Susan Bickrist's murder until 2 years later. Fourth Eye was sure that this story was also made up, and that Stephane had dragged a real victim into his web of lies. As for the woman in the infamous photo, it wasn't Susan Bickrest, and Stephane claimed he couldn't remember who she was. The final episode of the 2024 National Geographic docuseries, Killer Lies, featured a sit-down interview with the man himself. Stephane finally came clean. Kind of. He admitted that he never had Gerard Schaefer's remains, but said it wasn't a lie because the giveaway was just a joke. He denied that he ever outright plagiarized anyone. He just borrowed other people's stories to make his own more entertaining. He also excused his lies because plenty of people apparently lie in their memoirs. He conceded that he had made up the Eileen story, but insisted that he really did once have an American girlfriend who was murdered by a serial killer. Although he refused to divulge any names or further details. He revealed that the woman in the infamous photo wasn't his girlfriend, but a Spanish actress whose name he couldn't remember. Honestly, the entire segment is so sketchy, and it's hard to believe anything that comes out of his mouth. His body language read as someone who was uncomfortable and definitely hiding something. His face tightened, his hands shook, and he was fidgety and shook his head a lot. In my opinion, it's all bullshit, and he's just a guy who is morbidly obsessed with serial killers for no deeper reason. At the end of the documentary, we see that American journalist Lauren Collins managed to track down the woman in the photo. She was indeed a Spanish actress, still alive and living in Europe. Her lawyer confirmed her identity to the documentary's production, but requested that her name not be publicized. Thanks so much for watching this video. And yes, I absolutely do see the irony in all this. Stephane's story obviously raises a lot of ethical questions about capitalizing off the pain and suffering of others. Yet here I am making a YouTube video about him since scammer stories are popular right now. That being said, there is more to come, so I'll see you in the next one. It was the afternoon of Wednesday, 13th of November 2020. Local police arrived at the home of Melissa Caddick, an investment broker, and her husband Anthony Coletti, a hairdresser. Their luxurious 4-story, 5-bedroom home was located in Dover Heights, one of Australia's most affluent suburbs. Anthony had just reported his wife missing. She had been gone for 30 hours. Flustered, he showed police around, explaining that Melissa had vanished the previous morning. She had gotten out of bed around 5:30 a.m. A few minutes later, her 14-year-old son, Melissa's child from a previous marriage, heard the front door open and close. She often went for early morning runs, so neither Anthony nor his stepson thought much of it. But something was off. Her phone, wallet, and keys were still at home. Both cars were in the garage. The only thing she had taken was the exercise clothes she was wearing. 49-year-old Melissa Caddick was meticulous. She was a very organized, punctual person who never missed her appointments. But that day, she had already missed an appointment at her favorite store, Christian Dior, and skipped a meeting with a friend. She was also scheduled to have an appointment with her jeweler, who was supposed to be dropping off a custom diamond necklace for her at home. For Melissa to take off without saying a word was extremely out of character.
Hey, Anthony.
Yes.
G'day, I'm Sergeant Riley. I'm the one who spoke to you on the phone.
Yeah, coming up to see the paperwork.
No worries. Yeah, mate, I'm just a bit concerned. Can we go upstairs and have a chat? Yeah. Oh, mate, I'm just a bit worried about where your wife might be, and I really need you to give me the full info about what's happened, because I'm, like I said, I'm worried.
I got everything you need.
Because you told me on the phone that you last saw her yesterday at 5:30 in the morning, but now you're telling my offside is here. It was midnight last night.
It was.
So today, now it's Friday.
5:30 in the morning was when my boys saw her leave.
Right.
Yes, and
so because I asked you that 3 times.
I saw her at 12 o'clock at night, I believe I said.
Yeah, I just worried because you didn't tell me that on the phone. I asked you 2 or 3 times.
Look, I'm shaken. I haven't slept for days. As you can see, I haven't eaten for 3 days. This is all I've been working on. If I can help you, I'm here.
Right. So when did you last see her?
12 o'clock on...
Last night?
I guess that's Wednesday night.
Wednesday night?
Yes.
So it's now Friday? So it wasn't 12 o'clock last night?
No.
Right.
No.
Okay.
She's been gone 24 hours, over 24 hours now.
What time did the police come here, the federal police, on Wednesday?
6 a.m.
Mm-hmm.
Earlier, possibly, on Wednesday it was, and she's gone missing the next day on Thursday at 5:30, and that's the last we saw of her. I woke up at close to 6. Everything that you need is on the video cameras to see where she went, whichever direction it is, and the federal police have everything.
Right.
So that's what's going to help you. I suggested up that way. I know that we go there a lot. She loves that spot.
So what spot is that?
If you want to cut off the bad stuff, I would check that. So it's Rodney Reserve straight ahead there.
Rodney Reserve.
Yes.
And that overlooks the cliff, does it?
The cliffs, yes.
Right. Okay.
That's where we used to go. I've been there a few times since and checked. All day yesterday I checked. Nothing.
Righto.
Like I said, her next meeting is here at 5 o'clock, which I'd highly doubt she's going to make. She didn't even make her best friend meeting at 12:30.
So you said earlier that you went into court this morning? Whereabouts was that?
Via the phone.
The morning Melissa disappeared, she was scheduled to call into a 9:45 a.m. court hearing pertaining to a massive fraud investigation against her. The day before she vanished, Australian Federal Police and ASIC, the Australian Securities and Investments Commission, which is our corporate regulator, spent 12 hours raiding the house, seizing computers, boxes of documents, as well as a trove of fine jewellery. She was being accused of stealing $30 million from over 60 of her friends and family members, while posing as a licensed financial advisor.
We were both here.
Yep.
I was here at 6 or close to 6. And I'd woken up and she was gone. I'd come from upstairs, like I'd probably gone down twice. Maybe within the hour I'd gone up, like hadn't slept properly. I was here, woke up at 5:45 and she was gone.
Yep.
This is the last place I've seen her.
At 6 o'clock yesterday morning.
No,
Midnight, sorry.
Yes, midnight, yes.
Yeah,
yes.
sorry, I'm confused myself.
I get it, it's confusing. Like I said, I haven't slept for 3 days, I haven't eaten. As you can see, it's been a very lengthy ordeal. This is one of them. So they're kind of like that deal.
Okay. What colour are they?
I think they're silver like that, but not a shiny silver. It's like a pastel silver, like like a shimmer silver. More like probably this part of it here.
Yep.
But that's the sneakers that she's got on. Okay. If she's gone for a walk, she's got these on. She does that every morning, like she trains and stuff like that.
So she's got a second pair. Is that what you're saying?
Yes. Yep. But like I said, I didn't think anything of it in the morning because I just thought, oh, she's gone for a walk. That's what she does. So it wasn't until I got back and I saw her phone sitting there on the floor and I was like...
So when did you contact the AFP about it?
This morning.
Righto.
They were the first people I contacted because, like I said, they're the ones that know everything and they've got all of the information. So if you need to get anything, you need to get it off them.
Yeah.
They have everything.
As Anthony Coletti led police through the house, officers grew increasingly suspicious. He kept getting details mixed up and seemed oddly chipper. He appeared genuinely concerned about his wife, yet there were several moments when he smiled at the officers. He answered all of their questions, yet never got in touch with Melissa's parents to see if they had heard from her. He was initially reluctant to give police a photo of Melissa for social media, but eventually relented. When questioned why he didn't report his wife missing sooner, Anthony said he assumed she would return and believed he had to wait 24 hours before filing a report. When police asked him to come into the station to provide more information, he declined, claiming he was too busy working. Anthony was in a tough spot. The federal raid was just 2 days ago and he was terrified of saying anything that could potentially make his wife look guilty. Melissa was also 11 years older than her husband and by all accounts, the more dominant person in their relationship, as well as the breadwinner. Perhaps Anthony feared that if Melissa were to come home unharmed, she would be furious that Anthony got the police involved. For 3 months, there was no sign of Melissa Caddick. Surveillance footage didn't cover much of the cliffside area near their home, and reported sightings all led nowhere. Then, on the 21st of February 2021, more than 400 kilometers away, police finally found a clue. Melissa Louise Grimley was born on the 21st of April 1971 to a middle-class family in Sydney's southern suburbs. She was an ordinary girl. She was an average student. She was into ballet and fashion and got along with everyone. After high school, she completed a secretarial and business administration course, then got a job in administration at NRMA Insurance Investment Division. In her early 20s, Melissa began dating a man she had met at a pub one night. He constantly asked her for money, and after visiting her family home, cash and valuables started going missing. Melissa's parents hired a private investigator who found out that Melissa's boyfriend was a known con artist who preyed on naive young women. But Melissa was in denial and stayed with him, until eventually he drained her bank accounts, maxed out her credit cards, then vanished. Emotionally and financially drained, Melissa turned to fitness and hired a personal trainer. Health and exercise would become her lifelong obsession. In 1998, Melissa got a job as the office administrator of a new boutique investment firm working directly under the owner. Her boss later recalled her as an organized, efficient, and reliable assistant who was always well dressed. But 6 months into the job, Melissa got caught forging her boss's signature on 4 checks, stealing a total of $2,000. Her boss decided to not get the police involved, but immediately fired her. Around this time, Melissa's personal trainer introduced her to one of his clients, a prominent financial advisor looking to recruit an office manager who could be trained to become a financial planner at Wise Financial Services. Over the next couple of years, Melissa flourished in the role, completed her training, and became a financial planner. Many years later, Melissa would lie on her resume about this period of her life and added a bunch of tertiary qualifications. The University of Technology Sydney confirmed that it had, quote, no record of completion of a graduate diploma in finance or Masters of Business in Finance, or indeed any qualification under the name Melissa Caddick or Melissa Grimley. In April 2000, Melissa married British-born labourer Tony Caddick. They had a lavish wedding reception and moved into a renovated terrace in the affluent suburb of Paddington. When Melissa's friends questioned how she could afford the wedding, the house, the cars, she would explain that her older brother Adam was helping them out financially. In 2002, Melissa borrowed $750,000 to buy a 25% stake in Wise Financial Services. Her career was soaring, and in 2003, she was featured on the cover of trade magazine IFA. But just a year later, she would leave Wise, and it was not an amicable departure. Melissa had wanted to recommend her clients properties and shares to invest in, violating the company's strict compliance rules. Melissa signed a 5-year non-compete clause, recouped her $750,000 investment, and left the firm. In 2006, Melissa and Tony's son was born, and a few years later, the young family moved to Essex, England, to be closer to Tony's family. Melissa didn't work during their time in the UK. Meanwhile, Tony had transitioned into corporate law and commuted daily to London. It was in England when Melissa began her affair with her longtime Sydney hairdresser, Anthony Coletti, who was 11 years her junior. She would tell her husband she was going to Switzerland for finance courses, but she was actually secretly jetting off to Paris to meet up with Anthony. A mutual friend spotted them together and promptly informed Tony, who confronted her. He went through her phone and found countless messages between Melissa and Anthony, and also discovered that she had been paying for his flights from Sydney to Paris for their rendezvous. In January 2012, Melissa emptied their joint bank accounts and returned to Sydney with their son. Back home in Sydney, she painted Tony as abusive, claiming he forced her to move to England to isolate her, a tactic that would ensure their mutual friends would cut ties with Tony. By late 2013, Melissa and Anthony Coletti had moved in together and got married on New Year's Eve. The Moet flowed all night. Melissa had 3 outfit changes, including a Gucci wedding gown. Then the next day, she, her new husband, and her son flew to Aspen for a month-long $80,000 holiday. Melissa's friends found the pairing odd. She usually went for high-flying corporate guys, and Anthony was a hairdresser and aspiring DJ. It was clear that Melissa, the older woman, was the more domineering person in the relationship. But that being said, the two seemed to be genuinely in love. Soon after settling back down in Sydney, Melissa set up her own boutique financial services firm, Malaver, and invited her friends and family members to invest their hard-earned retirement savings with her. Her first client was a close childhood friend, a disability support worker and single mother. Melissa told her friend that she had made a fortune trading shares and offered to do the same for her. She convinced her friend to hand over her entire superannuation, then later got her to liquidate her share portfolio and hand over those funds as well. Except the money was never going to be invested. Instead, it went into Malaver's account, then straight into Melissa's personal bank account. She soon recruited the rest of her friend's family and stole a total of $10 million from them. This was how Melissa's scam worked. She targeted her nearest and dearest, her friends and family who knew and trusted her. She'd tell potential investors that she had scored a massive $86 million payout after creating a program that managed superannuation funds that was sold to a major financial institution. Now, she wanted to use her expertise to help her loved ones enjoy a bigger retirement fund than what traditional super funds could offer. She'd tell her close female friends that this was about women supporting women, and that she wanted nothing more than to see all of her friends live as lavishly as she did. She was warm, knowledgeable, and confident, and so several of her friends gave her their entire superannuation, hundreds of thousands of dollars each, accumulated over a lifetime of working. Unfortunately, it was all a lie. Melissa didn't even have an Australian financial services license to operate her business. Instead, she illegally used the license from her former colleague, Jennifer Porter, an offense that carries a 2-year prison term. Clients would deposit their money into Maliver's bank account, then Melissa would create a new ComSec online trading account for them. Except, she didn't. She would actually then transfer the money to one of her many personal bank accounts. Every month, she sent her clients fake portfolios, fake reports, and fake statements, complete with a copy and pasted ComSec logo in the letterhead. The statements would always show that her clients' funds made amazingly huge returns and never a loss. This would make her clients feel reassured and invest even more money. Melissa regularly forged her clients' signatures when needed, and also forged the signature of her father-in-law, Rodo Coletti, who was a justice of the peace, which is similar to a notary in the US. Melissa even convinced her own parents, Barb and Ted Grimley, to sell their house and give her $1 million to invest in properties. Her brother Adam, her aunts, uncles, cousins, childhood friends, personal trainer, they all trusted her with their life's savings. She would tell prospective clients that she only had a limited number of spots available to create the illusion that her services were in demand and exclusive. When clients requested to cash out early, she was able to pay them back using new investors' funds. As a result, Melissa was able to continue to run what was essentially a Ponzi scheme smoothly without raising any alarms. Between 2012 and 2020, Melissa had conned 60 people out of a combined $30 million. Later, court-appointed investigators and liquidators would find that not a single cent was ever legitimately invested. Instead, she spent the money on a life of pure luxury and excess for her, Anthony, and her son. In just 7 years, Melissa and her family went on 25 overseas holidays, including annual ski trips to Aspen and one $62,000 Fiji getaway. Sometimes she even hired private jets and limos. So you can cross those off your scammer cliche bingo card. Melissa loved fashion and was known for always being impeccably dressed. She splashed out on all the usual designer brands, but her favorite was Christian Dior. Shopping seemed to be her main pastime. She once dropped $54,000 at a single shoe store and $200,000 at a single jewelry store. In 2016, she bought her husband a $390,000 Audi R8 with the custom rego plate 2 Paws, which was a reference to his music company Paws Off Productions. After marrying Melissa, Anthony went part-time at his hairdressing job to focus on being an amateur DJ. In 2014, Melissa's brother's university friend introduced her to several wealthy surgeons who were eager to invest with her. After signing them up, she took out a $4 million home loan and bought her dream home in Dover Heights, one of Australia's most prestigious suburbs. The home had sweeping views of Sydney Harbour and was soon filled with fine art and luxury goods. Melissa's clients figured that business must be going well if she could afford this opulent lifestyle. Never did they once think that it was their retirement savings that were being used to buy Melissa's diamonds and couture gowns. In September 2019, Melissa was in the process of signing on a new client, another surgeon. The surgeon's wife found it odd that Melissa created a new ComSec account for them, but wouldn't allow them to access it. Of course, we now know that the real reason for this was because that account never actually existed. The surgeon's wife did her due diligence and contacted Jennifer Porter, the financial advisor whose license Melissa had been using without permission to operate Maliver. Jennifer Porter was shocked to learn that Melissa had been using her credentials. On the 26th of November 2019, ASIC, Australia's corporate regulator, received an anonymous complaint. However, because the report did not allege any financial losses, it got buried under the hundreds of complaints ASIC receive every month. But if you're a regular AM Glimpse viewer, you'll know that Ponzi schemes always collapse. And by late 2019, Melissa was desperately searching for a lender. Nearly a whole year later, after 2 more anonymous complaints, ASIC formally launched an investigation into Melissa Caddick. It's possible she had been tipped off because in August 2020, she deactivated all of her social media accounts, hired a document shredding company, and paid her mortgage 3 months in advance. On the 10th of November 2020, Melissa's passport and assets were frozen. Then the following day, from 6 a.m. to 7 p.m., ASIC raided her house. Footage from the raid showed officers going through countless boxes of fine jewelry, envelopes of foreign currency, and plastic bags filled with stacks of passports.
Ms. Caddick, are there any particularly high value items here, just in terms of our safe storage? We intend to seize the majority of what you've just been taken through.
I'd say they're all high value.
Okay, what would you consider high value?
For each piece?
Yeah.
The necklaces are 80 to 100.
This was the last known footage of Melissa. At 5:30 a.m. the next morning, she left her home for the final time and has never been seen since. A week after Melissa's disappearance, her husband Anthony and brother Adam fronted TV cameras, pleading for the public's help in finding her. As details about her alleged crimes and her extravagant lifestyle emerged, the story attracted significant public interest in Australia, and it seemed everyone had their own theory about what happened. State police launched an extensive land, air, and sea search for Melissa. Extensive CCTV footage was obtained and examined, but it failed to cover the entire area where she might have disappeared. There was zero activity in her bank accounts, no credible sightings, and the most concerning clue, her 14-year-old son who had been left behind, motherless, without an inkling of where she might have gone. 3 months later, a couple of campers stumbled upon a shoe washed up on the remote Burnda beach about 450 kilometers away from Melissa's home. Inside it was a decomposed human foot. The shoe matched the size and description of the running shoe that Anthony had showed police. A couple of days later, a DNA sample taken from the foot was positively matched to DNA samples taken from Melissa's toothbrush and family members. The discovery of the foot sent conspiracy theories into overdrive. Most people, including police, believe this was confirmation that Melissa had taken her own life by jumping off the cliffs near her home. Armchair detectives wondered whether Melissa had cut off her own foot to throw off the scent, to fake her own death so she could start a new life under a new identity. There was also speculation that her death could have been an accident. Perhaps in her distressed state that morning, Melissa wandered a little too close to the edge of the cliffs and accidentally fell into the water, becoming shark breakfast. The murder theory couldn't be ruled out either, given the number of victims she had defrauded. There was no shortage of people with a motive. Maybe she fell victim to another kind of shark, a loan shark. And where did Anthony, her husband, fit into everything? How much did he know about Melissa's Ponzi scheme? And was he involved in any capacity? Police had their suspicions about him since day one. Did Anthony potentially help his wife disappear? Kill her for a life insurance payout? With Melissa Caddick now presumed dead, ASIC dropped the criminal charges, and the case was handed over to the New South Wales coroner. As of March 2025, the rest of Melissa Caddick's remains have not been found. In September 2022, the coronial inquest of Melissa Caddick's disappearance and suspected death began. The court would hear evidence from her friends, family, colleagues, police, and other experts to determine whether Melissa was dead or not, and if so, under what circumstances. Anthony Coletti faced intense scrutiny during his 4 days on the witness stand. He insisted that he had no knowledge of Melissa's crimes and called her a, quote, straight shooter. But his testimony was riddled with inconsistencies and seemed to have trouble understanding the simple questions he was asked. He struggled to recount his own movements in the days following her disappearance, at various points claiming that he and his wife had not discussed the ASIC raid, but later he said they talked about getting a lawyer over dinner. He initially stated that they both went to bed at 9 p.m. the night of the raid, then later claimed he stayed up until 4 a.m. writing music. He also gave varying accounts about the last time he saw Melissa, sometimes saying midnight, at another point saying it was 5:30 a.m. the next morning. On the day Melissa was reported missing, Sergeant Trent Riley had asked Anthony if he had been anywhere the night before. Anthony replied, "Not that I know of." This was proven to be false. Anthony had actually gone to a friend's house at 8 p.m. to smoke weed, then deleted the texts arranging the meetup. He did not mention anything about the raid or Melissa's disappearance to his friends. Anthony had also told police that early morning runs were a part of Melissa's routine. However, surveillance footage showed that she hadn't gone for a single run in the month leading up to her disappearance. When questioned about the inconsistencies in his stories, Anthony admitted he was struggling to understand all the questions being thrown at him.
You told her that she was in bed?
Well, I lied to him because I wanted his honest opinion.
Alright, opinion about what? So I just don't understand.
Whether he was with Melissa or not.
His own lawyer attributed the inconsistencies to his, quote, limited intellectual capacity and negligible literary and numeracy prowess. Deputy State Coroner Elizabeth Ryan called Anthony a, quote, most unimpressive and unreliable witness. Anthony's own father later told 60 Minutes, quote, Anthony's a hairdresser, a damn good hairdresser, but I don't believe he has the capacity to know what a financial scheme is. I don't think he could have been in it at all or known what was going on. As for possible financial motives, the inquest was told that while Melissa did have a life insurance policy that included suicide cover, Anthony was not listed as a beneficiary. Anthony, along with Melissa's parents and brother, blamed ASIC for Melissa's death. They accused ASIC officers of, quote, severe negligence and inhumane treatment during the 12-hour raid on the 11th of November 2020. Anthony claimed officers denied Melissa food and water, tried on her clothes and jewelry, and laughed and giggled as they carried out their search. Anthony accused lead ASIC investigator Isabella Allen of being responsible for Melissa's death, saying that by ordering the removal of their home CCTV recorder, she prevented footage of Melissa leaving the house from being captured. However, video footage from the raid showed that Melissa and the officers all appeared calm and professional throughout. The inquest also heard that Melissa made herself a protein smoothie, was seen filing her nails, and even had a nap at one point during the raid. But the evidence wasn't enough for Anthony to let go of his vendetta against ASIC and Isabella Allen in particular, so he channeled the anger into an album of diss tracks. And if I had to listen to Anthony's music, it's only fair you do too.
November 11, 2020, 5 a.m. This is a true account of what happened on the day of the raid. Parental guidance is recommended. You allowed a greedy girl from a large corporation to interrogate our family for 14 hours, and you just stood around and drank and broke our zip tap.
You should turn your body cam off so we don't get in trouble.
Anthony also paid a visit to the ASIC office in Sydney and put up posters that said ASIC equals woman slaughter. He also spammed ASIC's LinkedIn page with comments alleging they killed Melissa. Police applied for an AVO restraining order on behalf of Isabella Allen. Anthony complained that the AVO was an attempt to defame him and obstruct his right to free speech. The application was abandoned. The possibility that Anthony or someone else murdered Melissa didn't seem likely. A senior crime scene officer who examined the Dover Heights house told the inquest that there was no blood, no sign of cleanup of blood, no signs of struggle at all. Neither of the cars in the garage had been cleaned in the 20 days since Melissa's disappearance. The theory that Melissa had severed her own foot to fake her death was also largely disproved. Although the foot found on the beach was too heavily decomposed to officially determine how it became detached from the body, an orthopedic surgeon told the inquest that it was unlikely a person with no medical training could amputate their own foot and survive due to shock, blood loss, and risk of infection. He also said the foot appeared to have been separated through blunt force trauma rather than sharp force. Investigators also contacted prosthetic specialists across the state, but no woman matching Melissa's age or description had inquired about a prosthetic foot. Studies of ocean movements confirmed it was plausible that Melissa's body could have entered the waters off Dover Heights in November 2020 and drifted to Burnda Beach 450 kilometers away over 3 months. In May 2023, Deputy State Coroner Elizabeth Ryan concluded that Melissa Caddick was dead but could not make any definitive findings about how she died. Anthony was criticized for hindering efforts to determine how, when, and where she died, but was ultimately cleared of any involvement. And with that, we might never know the truth about Melissa Caddick's fate unless new information comes to light. It was now up to liquidators to sell off Melissa's assets and recover as much money as possible for her 55 creditors. Reports vary on exactly how much she stole, but at the time of her disappearance, she only had $700,000 left in her bank accounts, leaving roughly $23 million unaccounted for. It was estimated that Melissa spent over $3 million on jewelry and clothing, but the auction of her prized luxury goods managed to only fetch $2 million. Her infamous Dover Heights house sold for just under $10 million, while her penthouse near Bondi, where her parents lived, was sold for a bargain $4 million, $1 million under the asking price. But after paying off mortgages and other debts, victims were left to share just $7.25 million, about 32 cents on the dollar for each victim. 31 defrauded investors filed a class action lawsuit against Melissa's auditors, alleging that the auditors were negligent, engaged in misleading or deceptive conduct, and breached the Corporations Act and the ASIC Act. A settlement was reached in December 2024. Anthony attempted to stake a claim over Melissa's properties, $7 million in shares, artwork, Melissa's Gucci wedding dress, jewelry, his wedding ring, and a watch. However, he was not a creditor of Melissa's fraudulent company and therefore had no legal right to any of the assets. He backed down on his claim but still walked away with several watches and pieces of jewelry. Melissa's son was able to keep $8,500 in cash given to him by family members, as well as 7 pairs of Nike and Adidas sneakers. Anthony and his stepson now live in an apartment in Vaucluse, still in Sydney's eastern suburbs. Melissa's son is now studying at university, while Anthony has returned to work as a hairdresser. So what do you think? Leave your thoughts and theories on this case below in the comments. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like and make sure you subscribe to help support this channel. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Richard Montañez's story of how he ascended from janitor to becoming the first Mexican American to be promoted to an executive role at PepsiCo has been hailed as the ultimate rags to riches tale and the embodiment of the American dream. His story has inspired 2 memoirs and a Hollywood biopic that premiered in March 2023. Richard's entire career hinged on the claim that he had invented flaming hot Cheetos. He became a motivational speaker, charging up to $50,000 per appearance, met US presidents, served on several boards, guest lectured at universities. Only problem? The story might be a lie. So here's how Richard's version of the story goes. Richard Montañez grew up in a migrant labor camp east of Los Angeles in the 1960s. He and his family of 14 lived in a one-room cinder block house and worked long days picking grapes for the wine industry. When Richard started school at age 7, he didn't speak English and was one of the few Mexican kids at a predominantly white school. Though California schools were technically desegregated, Mexican students still rode a separate bus from the white students. When he asked his mother to pack him a sandwich for lunch instead of a burrito so he could fit in better, she refused and told him to embrace his culture. The next day, she sent him to school with 2 burritos so he could share one with a friend. The day after that, he sold his spare burrito for 25 cents, an early sign of his entrepreneurial spirit. Even though he had discovered his talent for hustling, Richard didn't like school and dropped out sometime between 4th and 6th grade. Accounts vary. He worked a series of odd jobs, including at a slaughterhouse and a car wash. He joined a gang, but turned things around after a few run-ins with the law. At 13, he met Judy, a neighborhood girl who would later become his wife. They're still married. In his memoirs and interviews, Richard talks at length about overcoming his anxieties about being different, and how, even though he left school early, he credits his parents and grandparents for instilling a strong work ethic and teaching him valuable life lessons.
Look, I have a PhD. I've been poor, hungry, and determined.
In 1976, 18-year-old Richard applied for a janitor job at the Frito-Lay factory in Rancho Cucamonga. Unable to read or write well, Richard had Judy help him fill out the application. He was hired on the spot. The job paid $4 an hour with benefits, which was a big step up for the family at the time. He took pride in his work, even if it was just mopping the floors. Between shifts, he immersed himself in learning everything he could about his workplace, studying the machines, spending time in the warehouse, even pitching in with inventory and waste reduction. His dedication stood out. Other employees liked him, and he was noticed as a conscientious worker. In 1991, PepsiCo, Frito-Lay's parent company, got a new CEO, Roger Enrico. He launched an internal morale-boosting campaign called Act Like an Owner. Most employees ignored it, brushing it off as a corporate cliche. But Richard didn't. He took it to heart and was inspired and empowered. After 13 years on the job, Richard decided he wanted to learn even more about his company and its products. Off the clock, he asked to tag along with a salesman, helping load and stock trucks. While stocking shelves in stores around LA, he observed the various flavors of Lay's, Ruffles, Fritos, and Cheetos chips on offer and noticed something.
I saw no products that were catering to Latinos or to the person who loves spices. It was all pretty much, salt and maybe barbecue flavored. No one was selling, spicy flavored or anything hot. So I'm like, that was it.
A few weeks later, while eating elote, grilled corn slathered in butter, cheese, lime, and chili powder, with his kids at a street cart, he had his big light bulb moment. The shape of the corn cob reminded him of Cheetos. Why not put spicy seasoning on them? He rushed home to share his idea with Judy, and she helped him make a concoction of chili powder and other spices. At the factory, Richard grabbed a bag of plain unseasoned Cheetos from a batch that had come out of a malfunctioning machine. He took the plain Cheetos home, sprayed them with oil, then tossed them through his homemade seasoning powder. Richard shared his spicy Cheetos with his family and friends, and everyone loved them. Inspired by Enrico's Act Like an Owner campaign, Richard looked up the CEO's number in the company directory and phoned. Enrico's assistant, Patty Roof, answered and eventually put him through. Richard explained how he had heeded Enrico's call to action, how he came up with his idea and created samples in his own kitchen at home. Enrico was impressed by the ingenuity and told Richard he was scheduled to visit the plant in 2 weeks and wanted to hear a formal presentation. Richard later reflected that he had been naive to call the CEO, but in his second memoir, he wrote that it was an executive named Al Carey who had encouraged him to make the call. At this point, Richard still struggled with reading and writing and had no idea how to create a business proposal, so he and Judy went to the library and studied books on marketing strategies. At home, their kids helped fill 100 clear plastic baggies with their homemade spicy Cheetos. They sealed them shut with an iron and hand drew a devil and a guy in a sombrero on each package. He bought a tie from Goodwill for $3. He walked into the boardroom carrying his samples of red Cheetos to hand out to the highest powered executives at Frito-Lay. He was shaking and sweating with nerves, and at one point felt like he was going to pass out. But he pitched his product and explained there was an untapped market of consumers who craved spicy snacks. The execs were impressed with Richard's insights into the Hispanic consumer. And so, the Flamin' Hot Cheeto was born. Richard didn't get promoted or transferred to the R&D department at that point. Frito-Lay's food scientists took over to officially develop the product. 6 months later, Flamin' Hot Cheetos was soft launched in small Latino markets in East LA. In 1992, they launched nationally and has since become a cultural phenomenon.
The uproar over Flamin' Hot Cheetos, now banned actually in many schools around the country.
Last month, rapper Lil Xan claimed in an Instagram post that he was hospitalized for eating too many hot Cheetos.
In 1998, Richard was promoted to Quality Control Tech Services Specialist. Then over the next 30+ years, rose through the corporate ranks and eventually became the Vice President of Multicultural Sales for PepsiCo America, the parent company of Frito-Lay. In 2007, Richard began publicly taking credit for inventing Flamin' Hot Cheetos, sharing the story in speeches at local businesses and philanthropy award ceremonies. The story got picked up by major media outlets, then went viral across online platforms as feel-good fodder. He launched a new career as a motivational speaker, sharing his personal and business philosophies, wrote 2 memoirs chronicling his rise from janitor to VP, and received multiple awards and accolades from PepsiCo and community groups. In March 2023, a movie based on Richard's life was released. He currently has over 100,000 followers on Instagram and 460,000 on TikTok. When NPR contacted Frito-Lay to verify Richard's story, the company responded that documentation from the 80s and 90s was limited, and as a result, there was no formal record of how Flamin' Hot Cheetos were created. The institutional memory had faded over time. Former PepsiCo CEO Roger Enrico passed away in 2016, but former Frito-Lay CEO Al Carey not only supported Richard's claims, but also made public appearances with him. Former company execs Indra Nooy and Tom Greco both contributed blurbs to Richard's books. Frito-Lay's chief marketing officer Jennifer Sands said the company had helped movie producers piece together historical details. For over a decade, the company supported Richard's version of events, letting him spread his story unchecked and never publicly corrected the record. In mid-2018, 60-something-year-old Lynn Greenfeld happened across an article about Richard Montañez and was shocked to see him taking credit for inventing the Flaming Hot Cheeto, because in 1989, she had helped create the Flaming Hot Cheeto. Lynn got in touch with her former employer Frito-Lay to straighten things out, which triggered an internal company investigation as well as an investigation by the Los Angeles Times. In May 2021, journalist Sam Dean published an expose revealing the real origin story behind everyone's favorite addictive spicy snack. In 1989, Fred Lindsay, a Frito-Lay executive and former Southside Chicago salesman, pushed for a new spicy product after noticing the popularity of regional competitors in corner stores and gas stations. He passed the project to product manager Sharon Owens, who then assigned Lynn Greenfeld, who was fresh out of business school, to lead research and development. Lynn and her team traveled around Chicago, Detroit, and Houston, buying up dozens of unfamiliar chip brands and visiting small stores to get an understanding of what consumers craved. She came up with the brand name Flamin' Hot and worked with packaging and flavor development teams to finalize the product and branding. In August 1990, Frito-Lay trademarked Flamin' Hot and debuted Fritos, Cheetos, and Lay's in the new flavor in select stores in Chicago, Detroit, Cleveland, and Houston. Flamin' Hot Cheetos and Lay's went national in early 1992. So where does Richard Montañez fit into all this? The LA Times spoke with 20 former employees involved in new product development at Frito-Lay in the 1980s and 1990s. None of them recalled anything resembling the story Richard had repeated over the last nearly 20 years. 6 of them were able to corroborate Lynn Greenfeld's account, recalling that inspiration from Flaming Hots came from the corner shops of Chicago and Detroit. On top of that, Roger Enrico, the CEO who Richard had supposedly pitched to, wasn't even at Frito-Lay when Flaming Hot products were developed. He took over as CEO 6 months after Flaming Hots were already in the test market. Richard often said that the initial pitch meeting in the boardroom was in 1990, but Enrico's assistant remembered taking Richard's phone call in 1992 or 1993, after Flaming Hot products were already in stores around the country. The LA Times dug up a December 1993 US News and World Report article about businesses empowering their employees. In a section about Frito-Lay's Rancho Cucamonga plant, Richard was mentioned. Veteran machine operator Richard Montañez developed a new ethnic food concept aimed at the Hispanic market. After testing recipes and outlining a marketing strategy, Montañez burst forth with the kernel of an idea: Flamin' Hot Popcorn, which will soon make its debut. In March 1994, Flaming Hot Popcorn did in fact hit the shelves, but this was 4 years after Flamin' Hot Cheetos had already launched. Richard went on to help develop new snacks aimed at Latino consumers in the Los Angeles market, including a product called Sabrositas, but not Flamin' Hot Cheetos. He retired in March 2019 during the internal investigation into his story. Lynn Greenfeld told the LA Times, "It is disappointing that 20 years later, someone who played no role in this project would begin to claim our experiences as his own, then personally profit from them." Frito-Lay did not dispute any of the LA Times reporting. This is what they said in their statement. "None of our records show that Richard was involved in any capacity in the Flamin' Hot test market. That doesn't mean we don't celebrate Richard, but the facts do not support the urban legend." Ouch. After over a decade of supporting Richard, championing him, making him a brand ambassador, co-signing his underdog story, Frito-Lay did a complete 180. The company added more detail. According to our records, McCormick, Frito-Lay's longtime seasoning supplier, developed the Flaming Hot seasoning and sent initial samples to Frito-Lay on December 15, 1989. This is essentially the same seasoning Frito-Lay uses today. When former CEO Al Carey was asked to explain the conflicting news clippings and employee accounts, he stated, "This is such a long time ago. I bet there was a spicy Cheeto in the Chicago, LA, maybe Houston market too." NPR reporter Sarah Gonzalez also investigated Richard's claims and also concluded that Flaming Hot Cheetos were on the market in the Midwest of the US before Richard had ever pitched his version of a spicy Cheeto. But it was confirmed that he was involved in pitching a similar chip in California around the same time. PepsiCo, Frito-Lay's parent company, then released a statement doing another backflip to seemingly repair the relationship with Richard. The sincere truth is, at PepsiCo, we believe in the strength and power of teams, and we attribute the launch and success of Flaming Hot Cheetos and other products to several people who worked at PepsiCo, including Richard Montañez. Far from being an urban legend, Richard had a remarkable 40-plus year career at PepsiCo. His insights and ideas on how to better serve Hispanic consumers were invaluable and directly resulted in the success of Flaming Hot Cheetos. To be clear, we have no reason to doubt the stories he shares about taking the initiative to create new product ideas for the Cheetos brand and pitching them to past PepsiCo leaders. The company was essentially saying that it was possible that Flamin' Hot Cheetos were being developed simultaneously, but separately by different teams, since the West and Midwest division of Frito-Lay operated independently at the time. Richard has maintained his claims that he was behind the genesis of Flaming Hot Cheetos, but acknowledged that Frito-Lay's statement about McCormick developing the seasoning in December 1989 makes sense based on the timeline he remembers. As for the discrepancies between his and Frito-Lay's accounts, he believes that the lack of documentation was due to his low-level position in the company. The producers of Richard's movie were informed of the results of Frito-Lay's internal investigation in 2019, but decided to move forward with the project anyway. In July 2024, Richard filed a lawsuit against Frito-Lay, accusing the company of denying his role in creating Flamin' Hot Cheetos and of launching a smear campaign against him. The lawsuit alleges fraud, racial discrimination, defamation, and violations of California's unfair competition law. Richard called the LA Times article defamatory and claimed that Frito-Lay's comments caused serious damage to his motivational speaking career, including the loss of numerous partnerships and a significant drop in bookings. As of 2025, he continues to insist that he invented Flamin' Hot Cheetos. All that being said, Richard's success shouldn't be completely dismissed. He still went from a janitor who couldn't read or write to becoming a PepsiCo VP, an impressive feat by any measure. I guess he just felt the story needed a stronger hook, like being the inventor of one of the most iconic snacks of all time. Richard has also remained committed to giving back to his community through his foundation One Light. He and his family have distributed thousands of boxes of groceries, school supplies, and shoes to families in need. Let me know what you think in the comments. Is it all just a harmless exaggeration to make an inspiring story just a little bit more spicy? Or do you think Richard is a scammer? As always, thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Quacks, snake oil salesmen, charlatans, miracle cures, elixirs, nostrums, wellness gurus, alternative medicine, pseudoscience, health talk. Whatever you want to call it. Medical scams have been around for centuries. Unlicensed fraudsters selling questionable cures and false hope to sick, desperate people, exploiting their vulnerability for financial gain. Joao Teixeira de Faria was a so-called spirit healer, but he was also a cult leader and a cold, calculating abuser. Joao Teixeira de Faria was born in 1942 in a small village in central Brazil to poor parents. His father was a tailor and herbalist, while his mother was a devout Catholic. Accounts about his childhood vary, but most report that he left school at around age 7 due to lack of money and never learned how to read or write. He worked alongside his father and took on various odd jobs, laboring, digging wells, and bricklaying. According to legend, at the age of 16, while seeking shelter under a bridge, Faria encountered a spirit who told him to go to a nearby church. When he arrived, he immediately fainted. When he came to, he was surrounded by a crowd. He was told that while unconscious, he had channeled the spirit of King Solomon and healed people. Thus began his career as a healer. He became known as João de Deus in Portuguese, which translates to John of God. In 1979, a benefactor secured land in a small farming town called Abadiânia in central Brazil, which had a population of about 7,000. Faria opened up his own healing center, Casa de Dominacio, where he began conducting healing sessions. He would explain that he possessed no healing powers of his own, but rather served as a medium, an instrument of God. He would allow his body to be taken over by the spirits of long-dead doctors, such as Oswaldo Cruz, the Brazilian physician who helped eradicate yellow fever in the early 1900s. Once the entity was done for the day and departed, the persona of John of God would disappear, and John, the ordinary man, would wake up, seemingly oblivious to the extraordinary healings he had just facilitated. Faria has claimed that more than 30 entities work through him, though in recent years that number has increased to 70. For over 40 years, 3 days a week, Faria would sit on the throne-like armchair in the main room of the casa, receiving an endless procession of people of all ages who were hoping to be cured of cancer, terminal illness, blindness, HIV, depression, paraplegia, and every ailment in between. Initially, most of his visitors were busloads of people from around Brazil, but over time, word of his supposed healing abilities spread, attracting people from all over the world with incurable and untreatable conditions. Each day, about 1,000 people, all dressed in white, because the entities like white clothing, made their way down the dusty roads of Abadiânia to the Casa de Dominacio, waiting patiently for a brief encounter with Faria, with hopes of being miraculously cured. The queue of people, some desperately ill, some just regulars who attended as if it were church, would have to pass through a series of rooms before reaching John of God. First, past staff members chanting a group prayer, then the current rooms, which were packed with people meditating, supposedly creating a powerful energy field the entity could tap into for healing. Eventually, the line snaked its way to the main hall where Faria sat. Each person then got to have their hand held by Faria for a few seconds. Most people were given a prescription for John of God branded herbal pills, but sometimes they were asked back to decide whether they wanted a visible or invisible operation. Visible operations were dramatic and unsettling. These procedures included jamming forceps up the patient's nose, scraping the eyeball with a paring knife, teeth extraction, random cutting of the skin, and making incisions to insert his bare fingers into wounds. All of these surgeries were done without gloves, sterilization, or anesthesia. For those wanting to see uncensored footage, there are actually plenty of videos on YouTube, but just note, filming of the surgeries was very tightly controlled by the casa. Then there's the invisible surgeries. This was when the entities would enter the patient's body to perform an unseen operation. The patient was instructed to pray, meditate, and read holy scriptures. After the procedure, they had to follow a strict 40-day regimen. No sex, pork, alcohol, or pepper. Meeting John of God was completely free of charge, but the treatments he prescribed were not. Nearly every single one of the 1,000 or so daily visitors was prescribed with special blessed pills, which were sold exclusively at the Casa Pharmacy for $25 a bottle, with many people buying multiple bottles to take home. The John of God enterprise made about $14 million a year from these pills alone. What even are these miracle pills, you ask? They were nothing but passion flower, a popular and widely available herbal remedy known for its calming properties. Nothing special about them, other than having Faria's blessing. While the pills were the Casa's main source of revenue, there's also a shop that sold crystals, bottles of blessed water, which are mandatory after spiritual intervention according to the John of God website, wooden healing triangles, as well as your run-of-the-mill gift shop souvenirs, like books, CDs, DVDs, tote bags, t-shirts, mugs, jewelry, and postcards. Faria also offered sessions on the Casa's crystal beds, where a 60-minute session under some rainbow lights could set you back around $60. By the mid-2010s, John of God had grown into a multi-million-dollar business. The once small, sleepy village of Abadiânia had more than doubled in population, and Faria himself owned several nearby farms and mines. The Casa had over 50 staff, most of them volunteers who took care of logistics and marketing, and most importantly, protected Faria from hostile, skeptical journalists. Many of the senior staff were foreigners who themselves had been healed by the entities years ago and had since devoted their lives to Faria. Over 70 pousadas or inns opened up in the town and also operated expensive, John-approved 2-week-long tours. Cafes, restaurants, bookshops, New Age shops, and even stores that only sold white clothing popped up. Every new business, construction project, and even taxi drivers had to be approved by Faria. And of course, he took a kickback from everything. The John of God economy was booming. Faria even had staff scope out the rich visitors, once selling a crystal to a wealthy South African man for $50,000. Yet, he always told his followers and the media that he donated all of his money to the poor. So how did so many people fall for it? For the locals and Faria's original Brazilian clientele, spirit healing rituals were rooted in a blend of African superstitions and old-fashioned Catholicism, and over centuries produced Spiritism, which is now a relatively mainstream belief system in Brazil. Faria's particular brand of Spiritism quickly caught on. Stories of John of God's healing powers spread through word of mouth and gradually spread overseas. By the late 90s, he had become famous in alternative medicine and New Age communities in the United States, Canada, Australia, and Europe. He would encourage his most enthusiastic international followers to return home, spread the word among their communities, put on presentations, and even start their own touring businesses to bring more people to Abadiânia. In 1994, Australian writer Robert Pellegrino Estrich visited Faria and was supposedly called by an entity to permanently relocate to Abadiânia. He became one of Faria's most loyal advocates, and in 2001 wrote a biography about Faria titled The Miracle Man, which led to a documentary getting produced in 2003. The book and subsequent doco provided even more exposure in the English-speaking world, and by the mid-2000s, Western mainstream media began flocking to Abadiânia. Eventually, Faria captured the attention of Oprah Winfrey, one of the most influential people on the planet at the time. She promoted him several times in the early 2010s, featuring him in her magazine and on her shows. She had multiple guests share their positive experiences with Faria before she traveled to Abadiânia in 2013 to meet the man for herself. Oprah appeared to fully buy into his whole sham as she interviewed him and watched his surgeries with her own eyes. For anyone unfamiliar with the Oprah effect, back in the 90s, 2000s, and 2010s, any person, product, or service that Oprah endorsed instantly got a massive boost in sales and popularity. It was a very powerful marketing tool. So after John of God got Oprah's stamp of approval, more and more people were making the pilgrimage to Abadiânia. There is no shortage of glowing testimonials online, in forums and comment sections, where people claim to have felt the healing energy of the town or share their positive experiences with John of God. These stories, along with the Casa-controlled footage of the surgeries, convinced people who felt that modern medicine had failed them to journey to Abadiânia. By 2014, Faria claimed he had healed 8 million people through both his casa and on his international tours to Peru, Germany, the United States, Greece, Switzerland, Austria, Australia, and New Zealand. His clientele eventually included Brazilian politicians and celebrities, and it was even rumored that Bill Clinton had paid him a visit. So what's the go with all these people saying they've been healed? Firstly, we can't underestimate the power of the placebo effect. Brain imaging studies have shown that placebos can trigger a neurological reaction that can increase endorphins and dopamine levels, which can have therapeutic effects. It's not a well understood field, but the placebo effect could definitely explain why so many people felt better after being touched by John of God. Secondly, the 2-week-long holiday in Brazil, where a lot of time is spent meditating in a quiet, open-air facility, would definitely have some rejuvenating effects. It's not a stretch to suggest that a retreat like this could result in someone feeling better emotionally and physically. Then there's also the sunk cost fallacy at play. For a lot of people, a trip to Abadiânia takes a significant effort, financially and time-wise. Sarah Layton, an Australian woman featured in a 2014 article by the Sydney Morning Herald, spent over $50,000 traveling to Abadiânia, making donations and buying medicine and herbs, and she felt the price tag was totally worth it. But was that only because she had made such a significant investment into the experience that she could never admit it was a complete waste of time and money? Many people might even exaggerate their positive experiences to rationalize their decision and avoid feeling foolish for being bamboozled by an illiterate quack into buying blessed water, crystals, and wooden triangles. Another reason why so many people sought out Faria could be that desperate people do desperate things. There were terminally ill people and their families who exhausted all conventional treatment, clinging onto any little glimmer of hope they could. There were abuse survivors struggling with their mental health, looking for any reason to continue living. And João Teixeira de Faria exploited these vulnerable people for profit while giving them false hope. And if the promised healing didn't happen, then it was probably the patient's own fault for failing to follow the entity's strict instructions or lacking the right faith or attitude. How convenient. Faria had set up the whole operation so his scam couldn't fail. Before we get into Faria's most heinous and despicable crimes, let's quickly debunk the visible surgeries. First up, the forceps up the nose. In a 2005 episode of the American news program Primetime Live, TV doctor Mehmet Oz theorized that the tip of the forceps might be stimulating the pituitary gland, potentially creating a healing effect. This isn't possible, as the pituitary gland is situated behind 2 layers of skull bone. The forceps surgery is actually a common carnival trick known as the human blockhead, where a performer hammers a nail into their nasal cavity, giving the illusion that they are hammering through the skull without causing any damage. Then there's the eyeball scraping. The white of the eye, called the sclera, is actually fairly insensitive to touch. Faria's knife is likely dull, and it's doubtful he ever goes near the patient's cornea, hence why people in the video seem unfazed by having their eyeball scraped. The other visible surgeries involve Faria making superficial incisions on the patient's back, chest, or abdomen, and sometimes even inserting his bare fingers into the cuts. One of the supposed miracles is that no one has ever developed an infection. This is also easily debunked. Quite simply, not every cut, scrape, or puncture gets infected, and mild infections usually just heal on their own. I feel like I'm just stating the obvious here. Many of the miracles in John of God's videos can also be explained by an adrenaline rush. Adrenaline can mask pain as well as increase blood flow towards the muscles, causing a temporary surge in energy or strength, which might explain why someone in crutches would be able to walk a few steps without them. Then if we take a closer look at the documentaries and TV specials made about Faria, it's obvious we never see any actual healing happening at any point. Just some sleight of hand tricks and people saying they feel better. In 2014, 60 Minutes Australia revisited some Aussies who had seen Faria in a 1998 episode. One woman whose breast cancer had been cured by an entity died 4 years later. None of the other participants' conditions had improved 16 years on. Similarly, 2 of the 5 people featured in the 2005 Primetime Live episode died just a few years after their visit, and the others saw no improvements in their health. The CASA didn't keep any records of their patients, and there's virtually no documented follow-ups on anyone or concrete data of the outcomes of patients. If you've made it this far into the video, thank you, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave a comment. This chapter contains descriptions of sexual abuse and references to crimes against children. In 2014, 60 Minutes Australia aired a segment about John of God, with a skeptical view for a change. And for the first time on camera, viewers saw the real Faria. He had walked off the interview after a fairly mild question about his earnings. When he thought he was out of sight of the cameras, he essentially said, "F your mother," to the 60 Minutes interpreter, a woman half his size, then grabbed her wrist while demanding to see the footage. Before all the Oprah hype, Faria had already faced a lot of controversy. He had been arrested several times in the 70s and 80s for practicing medicine without a license and was even jailed briefly. In January 1980, Faria was charged with the murder of taxi driver Delvanir Cardoso Fonseca after discovering Fonseca was having an affair with his then wife. Fonseca was shot in the back, but there wasn't enough evidence to prove Faria was responsible, so he was acquitted. Later that same year, a 16-year-old girl accused Faria of sexual assault during a healing session, but the case was dismissed. There were rumors that he sexually abused staff in the CASA and had misappropriated donations meant for building a soup kitchen to renovate his own home. In 2010, during a trip to Sedona, Arizona, an American woman reported him for sexually assaulting her during a healing session, but one of Faria's associates pressured her to drop the case. Faria also fathered at least 9 children with 3 wives. In September 2015, Faria was diagnosed with stomach cancer. Turns out the entities could help everyone but their human vessel, as Faria had been relying on conventional doctors for years. An endoscopy revealed he had a tumor, and after a 10-hour surgery, the real kind, with anesthesia and gloves, and extensive chemotherapy at one of Brazil's best hospitals, he was cancer-free. It's unclear how many passion flower pills or how much blessed water was involved. On the 7th of December 2018, the story of Faria's history of sexual abuse broke on the Brazilian talk show Conversation with Biol on the Global TV network. Dutch choreographer Zahira Lenica Moose recounted her 2014 visit to Abadiânia, where she was chosen for a private consultation with Faria. "You feel special," she said. He had led her into a bathroom, forced her to touch him, and then raped her. She stayed quiet through repeated abuses because she was given special privileges around the casa and was allowed to assist in the surgeries, as she was being trained to become a medium herself. The TV special also featured 10 Brazilian women who all remained anonymous, accusing Faria of similar sexual abuses. American tour guide operator Amy Bianchi, who worked in Abadiânia, also appeared on the program to confirm that she had witnessed sexual abuse in the compound. The next day, Brazilian newspapers reported 5 more women who had come forward with their stories. The number of claims led to the state of Goiás prosecution office to set up an email and phone line to receive more reports. And in 30 hours, 200 more allegations poured in from all around Brazil and 2 other countries. As prosecutors collected these reports from hundreds of women who did not know each other, the similarities in their stories were striking and disturbing. Faria's MO was to isolate women by luring them into his office located off the side of the main casa building. He'd tell them about how they possessed strong energies and that he needed to transfer some of that energy to him, then he would violate them. He would then give them crystals as gifts or offer to train them to work as a healer. In the 2021 Netflix docuseries about Faria's crimes, 2 former Casa staff members recall that he would handpick attractive, unaccompanied women from the long line of people and tell them to meet him in his private room later. Faria got so bold that he even assaulted women in front of the whole main hall. When some brave staff members questioned him about it, he said it was simply part of the entity's method of healing. It was clear that the abuse was an open secret around the casa. Signs around the compound asked for silence, but they also served as a reminder to Faria's victims to stay quiet. Investigators dug up ignored and dismissed reports dating back to the 80s. There was a case in 2001. A 17-year-old girl ran out of the inn she was staying at, screaming that Faria had abused her while her parents attempted to silence her. The Netflix docuseries showed a video of Faria later joking about the incident with his entourage. In 2013, there was an incident where Faria visited a 16-year-old girl in her bedroom while her father was present. Faria told the father to turn around and close his eyes while he assaulted the girl. It was another pattern in the allegations, victims' families turning a blind eye or refusing to believe that their idol, John of God, could be capable of such vileness. One accuser was Faria's own daughter, Dalva Teixeira. She alleged that her father abused and raped her between the ages of 10 and 14, then continued to control her into adulthood. When she got pregnant by her boyfriend, Faria had beaten her so severely that she suffered a miscarriage. "My father is a monster," she said. On the 16th of December 2018, João Teixeira de Faria, aged 76, surrendered to the police after 2 days on the run. Brazilian prosecutors announced that the number of accusers had climbed to 600, ranging in age from 9 to 67. Court documents showed that Faria tried to withdraw nearly $12 million from his bank accounts before he gave himself up. A search of his heavily secured house was conducted. An underground panic room was discovered, which contained a large safe full of cash and guns. It was also revealed that Faria's team had tried to stop the Conversation with Biol expose from airing. The John of God office has denied all allegations. In Faria's police interview, he said he has never committed any crimes and that he didn't remember any of the women who have accused him. Many Casa workers and John of God devotees have defended him and held demonstrations in the streets of Abadiania, declaring his innocence. Faria's current wife, Anna Kayla Teixeira, who is 34 years his junior and first met him when she was just 10, has denied any knowledge of the weapons or cash found in their home and has also dismissed all accusations against her husband as slander. In December 2019, Faria was sentenced to 19 years and 4 months in prison for the rapes of 4 women. More convictions followed, with Brazilian media reporting his total sentence was now over 63 years. However, in early 2020, due to the pandemic and Faria's age, he was released from prison and granted house arrest, much to the shock and dismay of the victims. In the 2021 Netflix docuseries, Faria is shown sitting in his large and luxurious home, wearing an ankle monitor, flipping through newspaper and magazine clippings of his glory days, giving a slight smile as he came across his feature in Oprah's magazine. In September 2023, the Goiás State Criminal Court sentenced Faria to a further prison term of over 118 years. A few loyal John of God volunteers remain at the Casa, although Abadiania is now practically a ghost town.